Hello and welcome to Missed Checkpoints, the video game book club podcast. Today we're starting a discussion on Ninja Gaiden Black. I'm your host Marqus, and joining me today as always are the homies. First off, we have Trevor.
What's going on?
Next, we got Greg.
What up?
And last but not least, we have the homie Dante.
You guys are in for a really good episode.
Speaking of episodes, this is your game, so I will defer to you so you can introduce it.
Introduce what?
This
I'm just messing with you,
fantastic
dog.
piece of media that we are experiencing.
All right. So the game we're going over this week is Ninja Gaiden Black. It's developed by Team Ninja. The project was led by Tamanobu Itagaki, who's since left the company, but he has formed his own video game studio, Valhalla Games. Team Ninja is known for the Dead or Alive series first and foremost. Also Ninja Gaiden, Neo, their newer series, and also the infamous Metroid Other M. So a little bit of background on the game. Originally, Ninja Gaiden was a NES game, and there's actually a trilogy on the Nintendo Entertainment System. And in 2004, we got the reboot, which was pretty much a prequel to the NES games. Came out on the original Xbox. The development cycle lasted 5 years for the game, and it kind of had a pretty long legacy. Originally, it was planned as a Dreamcast game. At some point, it was planned to move to the PS2, but Itagaki saw so much potential in the power of the Xbox that he pretty much demanded that it ended up there. The game was targeted for Western audiences. He wanted the game to be very violent, and he also wanted it to be hard but alluring. One of the interesting quotes that I found about it was he said he wanted something that challenges reflexes rather than memorization and timing. And another quote I found, this is by Eric Williams, the designer of God of War's combat engine. He explained that Ninja Gaiden prohibits players from stopping or changing attacks in mid-stroke. In contrast, God of War allows for players to do so, and also Devil May Cry allows that freedom in certain attacks. Williams says that compared to those two games, the combat system in Ninja Gaiden was harder to master. However, it lets players fight their computer-controlled foes on equal terms. So, as I said, the original Ninja Gaiden reboot came out in March 2004, but it had one of the first instances of DLC in the industry. So it came out with what was known as the Hurricane Packs, and they were both free. Hurricane Pack 1 introduces AI tweaks, new camera option, lots of new enemies, and it also had an intercept mechanic, which actually isn't featured in Ninja Gaiden Black. Hurricane Pack 2, it added a lot of enemies and a couple new bosses. One of the biggest accomplishments of the Ninja Gaiden reboot was the Master Ninja tournament they held. And essentially it was one of the biggest tournaments for just like a standard single-player game, which pretty much if you had Xbox, you'd go through the game, try to get as much karma as possible. And I think if you were in the top 16 or so, I really don't know the number, you were pretty much entered into this like live tournament. So I thought that was really cool. Eventually, Ninja Gaiden Black got released September 2005, pretty much right before the Xbox 360 got released. And it could be seen as what we know as a Game of the Year edition, more or less. After that, Ninja Gaiden Sigma came out for the PS3 in June 2007. And that was a very interesting thing that a lot of people didn't see coming, because Itagaki was very adamant about this game being Xbox only. If I recall, he talked a lot of trash about the PlayStation back then. Inevitably, Ninja Gaiden got sequels, Ninja Gaiden 2, which was pretty well received, and Ninja Gaiden 3, which wasn't well received. And Ninja Gaiden Black has over a 94 rating on Metacritic, making it the second highest rated original Xbox game ever of all time, and the 58th highest rated game of all time, which I don't think any other game is even close to the top 100 from what we played. I'm just dropping that fact. and let people stew on that for a couple seconds. And for our playthrough, on this episode, we've played through Chapter 9. So going into the story takes place before the original Ninja Gaiden on the NES, and also takes place before Dead or Alive. Ryu Hayabusa is entrusted with the Dragon Sword, while his father, Joe Hayabusa, trains in the Sacred Wilderness. And pretty much like the intro cutscene, it kind of introduces the Dragon Sword and the Dark Dragon Blade, both being protected by the Hayabusa clan, and pretty much they seem to be yin and yang swords for one another. And right at the beginning of the game, Ryu is given an invitation to train with his uncle Mirai, and that leads us into the events of the game.
Okay, thank you for that.
I see some stuff happened in the chat while I was gone.
Thank you for that introduction. I guess before we get going, let's do a round table. Has anybody not played Ninja Gaiden before? I'll start. I've never played Ninja Gaiden before. Didn't know what I was getting into.
What a rhetorical question.
Has anybody else never played a Ninja Gaiden before?
I have never played a Ninja Gaiden game before.
Oh, so there's two of us.
Hey, was this anybody's first Ninja Gaiden? Huh. Greg, was this your first Ninja Gaiden game ever?
Nope.
What did you play before this? Well, aside from Ninja Gaiden. Gaiden.
Well, I beat Ninja Gaiden when it first came out, and then I beat Black. I actually played Black twice, so I guess it's like my fourth time actually playing this game.
Oh yeah. So yeah, we played the actual lesser version of this game.
Yeah.
Lesser meaning like Black over because Black over the original.
Black is the definitive edition.
Yeah, basically.
But
like you didn't get Lunar in the original. There was balance tweaks made to a lot of the enemies.
Okay.
Black made it a little bit harder in a couple situations.
I did a little bit of research, and I saw that Black was the better version of this versus Sigma, because I heard there were a lot of frame rate issues with Sigma in comparison.
Yeah, the Sigma games are... I've never actually played one, but from what I've read, they've done a lot of weird things, like some areas just don't have as many enemies, and I forget all the stuff they did, but Sigma and Sigma 2 are considered not as good as their counterparts.
Gotcha. So I guess the other thing then too, how would you describe this game? Like, what is the genre of this game? It's it's an adventure. Is it an action game?
Oh, it's a masterpiece.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess we've played a couple of masterpieces.
Also, it is an action game.
Like akin to the Devil May Cry series on Onimusha, and is there other Bayonetta?
Yeah.
Technically, I guess there's subgenres. There's Greg might be able to help me, the Mosu'u genre, where it's Onimusha kind of falls into that, where there's just a ton of enemies on screen, and you're just kind of, I don't want to say button mashing, but it's not, you're just killing 100
It's not challenging. It's mostly just keeping a combo going, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Trevor, let me start with you. Going into this game, do you have any background with those types of games? The Devil May Cries, the Onimusha?
No, never played any of them.
Okay, so this you were completely fresh, you've didn't know what to expect.
Yeah, the closest thing I can think of, that this game, or that I was thinking this game was going to be close to, was probably Metal Gear Rising.
That's pretty decent.
I mean, that's the closest thing I've played to.
Oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
Were you disappointed? Was it what you wanted it to be?
Okay.
Can I present my closing argument, Your Honor?
I'll say one thing before we get deep into it. I like more things about this game than I dislike.
Okay. That's a good spot. That's a good spot to leave it. Okay. I know for me, I didn't know what to expect. Besides, I knew that this game even before Dante said, like, you guys need to brace yourselves and all that, like, I knew this game is known for being a difficult game. So
Renowned for it.
Yeah, so I knew going in that, like, we may leave somebody behind. And I assumed it was going to be me or Trevor. And, like, I think so far so good, but there's still time. As far as this genre of game, the only one I've played, I guess, I didn't even think of Metal Gear, but it's Metal Gear, and then I played Bayonetta, like, a while ago, and I was not good at either of those games. And it's not necessarily my preferred genre of choice. I guess I don't like Masterpiece, the genre. But I will say I have more things that I dislike about this game than I like, but there are things that I do like that stand out in comparison to some of the other games we play. So I know a lot of my feelings toward this game are my own personal feelings, and I don't necessarily think that, like Dante kind of alluded to, like, the perception/reception of this game speaks for itself. So I'm not here to say that this game, that is one of the highest rated Metacritic games of all time, everybody that's played it is wrong. I'm not here to say that. I just, personally, for my taste,
They're stoop kids.
They are stoop kids, yes. I stand by that. And it's just not a game that I would prefer to play. How about that? Not to show my hand too much. Trevor?
So I was looking on Giant Bomb at some of the similar games to Ninja Gaiden, and I have played some of these on here. El Shaddai, would y'all say that's similar? I know Greg's played it.
It's very light. It's kind of got that enslaved-esque combat.
Okay, and Strider? This is the newer one, yeah. But that one was more like a Metro.
Scroller.
Yeah.
Yeah. Has anybody played any of the DMC series? I guess that, because that's basically kind of the same thing.
I've wanted to, but I haven't.
Okay.
I honestly, like, I have no desire to play after playing Marvel vs. Capcom.
I hate Dante so much.
I hate Dante so much. And I don't really care for Virgil. Trish is cool, but yeah,
Who do you hate more of the two?
Dante.
Really?
Yeah, man.
As many salty matches as you've had against Virgil?
I mean, but Dante,
when he says I need more power, and then he just takes
games,
all
man.
of your health?
He's in 2 games. He's in Marvel 3 and Infinite, where Virgil's only in 1. So I've had to deal with Dante longer.
Just a little bit of background information. Marqus is a pretty adamant Marvel vs. Capcom player. And Dante and Virgil happen to be pretty
prominent,
well used, prominent characters in those scenes.
Yeah. I guess.
One last question.
Yeah.
So, Greg, have you, or I guess, did you play any action games prior to Ninja Gaiden in the modern 3D action game genre?
I guess you mean like when Ninja Gaiden.
Pretty much. Did you play Devil May Cry before this game
Oh
came out?
yeah.
Okay.
So I was kind of familiar with that kind of series, or I guess that genre.
I keep going back and forth whether I played Devil May Cry 1 first or this game first.
I think I played Devil May Cry. I want to say it was like right at release whenever it came out. Because I think I remember like that and Final Fantasy X being out around the same time.
That sounds about right. And yeah, Devil May Cry 3 came out in February 2005, so there's no way I played that before Ninja Gaiden like vanilla.
So, we want to get into this game now? Stop talking around it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready.
The Way of the Ninja, Chapter 1.
Okay, so this game, I think it opens up. One of the things that I really appreciate is the cutscenes in this game are really good looking. They've aged really well, I guess. Is it Team Ninja you said?
Yes.
Team Ninja, the team that put the time into the cutscenes and the CGI, the cutscenes of this game, the type of art style that they used, it doesn't look bad even 13 years later.
Yeah.
Like, they're very sharp, good-looking cutscenes.
And if we're being real, this is like one of the best-looking original Xbox games back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, the actual game itself, when you're in there and playing, it also, like, I kind of was a little leery, like, coming into this game thinking, like, oh, like, you're going to see a lot of, like, harsh textures and weird, like, polygonal, like, you know, when you play some of the older 3D games, not to say that this is, you know, like PS1 era, but, like, you know what I mean?
They've got a very clean art style to everything.
Yeah. So everything is, like, smoothed out, and it looks like an older, like, but still, like, a modern game, if that makes any sense.
It doesn't look like the low poly Tomb Raider or lower poly.
Yeah. Or even, like, when we played Beyond Good and Evil, this is, like, a few years after that. And, like, just the art style itself, like, makes this game look drastically more, like, modern, you know? So, I that is something that I really did appreciate. And I thought it aged really well. I think this first mission, you're basically, it's like almost like a tutorial, in a sense, where you're seeing a lot of kunais. Actually, let me take that back. You're seeing a couple of kunais in the map that you have to get to, and it kind of tells you how to progress through the level. And so it tells you, like, oh, you can wall run, or you can wall jump, or you can I forgot it taught you about using your throwing stars, your ninja stars. Do you think, and be honest, everybody, Dante included, do you think that this is a good tutorial, and, like, do you think this prepared you for the game that you were about to jump into? And since you're the only other new person at it, I'll start with you, Trevor.
Are you saying just the very beginning? Like, before you get to any combat?
Beginning. I mean, I think it's in between combat, because I think you start the game and don't you fight, don't you fight an ninja?
You fight two ninjas immediately.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I think it gives you a very simplified tutorial on combat. As far as running, it does a pretty good job. Like, it's kind of thorough enough. As far as, like, the free running, being able to jump between walls. But combat, it gives you enough information to defeat those two that it gives you.
But beyond that?
Yeah, beyond that is just like, you know, you're going to unlock like combo moves and other weapons and stuff, but we're not going to tell you how to use them.
Okay. And I know it's kind of hard because Dante and Greg, they have more experience in the game, so I feel like they probably skipped a lot of these ninja stars because they are, like, knowledgeable enough about the game. They know what they're getting into, but it was a little bit frustrating sometimes where it was like I feel like they taught you enough of the basics that, like, I don't have the same issue with this game that I have with Revengeance, where Revengeance, it was just kind of, I felt like it was like, here's how you attack, here's how you jump, here's how you slide, here's how you run, good luck. And I feel like this game does a better job of, like, making sure that you know some of these key things in order to progress. But I don't feel like, I think they rely on the player experimenting more in order to figure out a lot of the necessary things in order to survive in this game, if that makes any sense.
I think that's the case, but I also think that's by design.
I agree. I do think it's by design. So, like, hearing you do that introduction, you were saying, like, they purposely tried to make the game, the encounters, like, every fight could be your last, kind of. Like, you're not going to, like, I think every game we've played prior to this game, I've said the term fodder enemy, and I don't think there is that in this game. Every encounter you have, you run the risk of dying. Every single encounter. And that is something that I was not, that was something that I was not prepared for. I've never played a game like this.
I think when you meet an enemy, and maybe for that entirety of the chapter that you meet the enemy, they're not fodder. But I think as you open up your skill set and you kind of get more comfortable with the enemy, they kind of end up in that lane. So some of the enemies that you were fighting in Chapter 1, if you ran into them later in the game, they could still potentially really mess you up. But you also have the tools to take them down. And if they drop like health and stuff like that, it's like, well, I might come back here and just fight these guys so I can like get my health back.
Is that something, like, one of the things I ran into was like the drops that they dropped. They would either drop the essence, which is your currency, or they would drop life. And that wasn't always consistent. It's like they always drop something, but like sometimes I could like be stuck at an encounter and I'd, play it 5, 6, 7, 8, however many times. And like every 3 times or every 4 times I would get life. It seemed like I was getting essence more often. Is there any like rhyme or reason to that? Like I go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say I feel like it's based on how little life you have left, because I feel like if you're under around 25% or less, you're more likely to get health from a enemy than essence. But I don't know if there's like an actual like.
I think it's a table. Like there are definitely some enemies that drop it more than others. When you're fighting the white ninjas, which we will get to pretty soon, I noticed more so than like the previous times I've played this game, they drop a ton of blue health or blue essence. And like when we fight the Hydrocubus, which we'll talk about later, every time you take off its tentacles, I think those have about I'd like to say about an 80% chance of dropping health.
I actually never saw that thing drop anything but health. So, I mean, it may be just where my life bar was at in comparison to yours as well. But yeah, that was something that I noticed. And like, this is another thing that I did like that the enemies could kill you. And like what you said, just Dante, makes a lot of sense, where it's like, you're going to fight these enemies for the first time in Chapter 1, and you may not see them again in the next chapter, or maybe even the next chapter. But if you do run into them again, they do, in a sense, become fodder, I guess, because like you, in theory, have learned their patterns. Because like each chapter, it seems like, introduces a handful of enemies, and you fight mostly those enemies in that specific chapter. And if they do pop up later on, in theory, you fought them enough times that you have learned their patterns and their fighting style, so that way you know the counters and when you need to block and when you can attack and just how to fight them, I guess. For the most part, I think Trevor could
Spider
probably...
ninjas.
Yeah, exactly. Trevor could probably attest that some of them, not that is not necessarily the case for.
Spider ninjas have no honor. No honor whatsoever. Like, are they the only enemies that you've encountered so far? Well, I guess we have, at the point we're at, we haven't encountered them. But it seems like most enemies will attack you one at a time, and then occasionally you'll have one that uses a ranged weapon or shoots you from a distance. But these guys will fight you at once. Are those the only enemies that do that?
I think, nah. I mean,
I think regular ninjas do it occasionally.
I was gonna say the mages. I've definitely got comboed by more than just spider ninjas, where like I get hit by one, then get hit by another to keep a combo going.
But I do think they're like by far the most aggressive.
Yeah. All right, let's kind of progress a little bit through the story, and we can hit on some of these gameplay things too. So I don't really... I don't really remember specifics about these chapters, minus like the enemies and like I guess Dante kind of outlined like the plot of each chapter. So this first chapter, you are like, in addition to it being like the tutorial and try to teach you what to do, your end goal is to get some training, I believe. What's up, Greg?
Well, since we're still on chapter 1, I don't know. I guess we're gonna get to this eventually. But I had a question about, I guess you and Marq, or you, Marq and Trevor. Did you guys have any issues on the first boss? Because back when I first played this game, chapter 1 was notorious for making people quit the game. So
Yep.
I was just curious how you guys held up on that part.
You can go first, Trevor.
I don't remember having any issues, honestly.
I honestly, like, looking back at it, I think I actually watched somebody play this game when it first came out. My neighbor had this game, because I was like, I don't know what the Japanese structure is called, with the sliding, like, doors and all that, that building that you're in. But I remember watching somebody do that part and consulting a map. And I do remember them fighting some dude, old guy with nunchucks. So when I fought the dude, I had like deja vu, despite like it not being me that played it. I do remember like, man, like when this game maybe first came out, or like a little bit after that, I think I saw somebody do this. This looks familiar. But I honestly, I was a little bit stuck here. I think I died a couple of times because I couldn't figure out when I could and couldn't hit this guy. And it seemed like, this was something that I've run into, and I've seen the error in my ways, I guess you could say. But like, I think there was one point where like you're using your sword against him, and you guys do the classic like lock your weapons against each other, and it's like a struggle. And like, I just kept taking massive damage at that part because there was no, and this is me maybe being more accustomed to modern games, but there was no like button prompt to let me know that I should be hitting something right now. So I kept taking massive damage at that lockup part, and I was like, what can I do to avoid that? And then I ended up like scraping by him one of my plays, and then I remember posting in our chat, and I'm like, yo man, like I couldn't figure out what to do. And then I think Dante was the one that said, you can just mash X at this part. Like, and Trevor was kind of like, I just assumed that that's what you're supposed to do. And I think it was like just me, either one, not necessarily being too familiar with the genre, but then also just like being more accustomed to modern games and like getting at least that button prompt on the screen. So I had some issues with him. Not like I was going to quit the game, but I was just like, dang, like, is this what it's going to be like?
But I don't even think, like, you're getting what Greg's getting at. People got stuck on that guy for, like...
Oh, I get it. I get it. Like, I understand because, like, yeah. Could have been one of those people because, like, I did not understand how to do damage on that guy because leading, like, everybody you fought up to that point, well... This is true and not true. So I was going to say, everybody you fought up to that point, like, you could just get by like, mashing. So you didn't necessarily have to put any thought or recognize any type of pattern in order to defeat them. So when you run up against this dude with this massive health bar, it's like, oh, shoot, like, it's just going to take a lot longer to do damage on him. But then he's, like, one of, like, I mean, he's blocking a lot of stuff, and like that you didn't really. I think the white ninjas were blocking a little bit, but the regular ninjas weren't. So it was like I could see people just going in like thinking it's an Animushu or whatever. And is it Mushu or Musha?
Musha.
Animusha, and just thinking like, oh, I can XXY, just whatever button combination they can think of, and just slowly chipping away at his health, and this dude is blocking and just hitting you for a grip of damage, and you're like, yo, hold up, like what's going on here? Like everything up to this point, I'm not prepared for, like it was not enough training to prepare me for this dude, so I can definitely see that.
And like in retrospect, like now that I think about it, I think the game kind of does a poor job in preparing you for that. But I'm pretty sure that's Itagaki's intention to kind of, because just from I think the interviews that he did around this game, he kind of seems like he just wanted it to be like extra difficult, you know.
And everybody like points out, oh, this was a predecessor to Dark Souls, and I was kind of hesitant to agree with that at first. But during this boss fight, it made me think this game is so much more defensive and demands the player be so much more defensive than other modern action games like Bayonetta, Devil May Cry. Those games don't even have like a actual block button. They have a counter button. They don't have a block button. So a lot of it is learning the patterns of your enemies, learning where their weak points are, waiting for the opening, and then making like a couple attacks, getting out of there, and trying it again.
And that was something that I was not used to, I guess you could say, because I like blocking is, I'm not necessarily mashing or whatever, but like once I fought this dude, I'm like, yo, like what the heck? So like I was still in the mindset of not blocking and just trying to roll, and I was getting bodied by trying to roll out of the situation, and that was not working for me. So what about you, Trevor? I mean, I know you said you didn't necessarily have the same issues, but
yeah, I think like you said, this chapter you can pretty much button mash your way through, and I kind of scraped by the first boss. Like I think I beat him on my first try, but you
didn't recognize the pattern. You just kind of got lucky.
Yeah, but I think after that, Dante was the one who kind of told me about being able to recognize which attacks to block, because I don't think I even got that down until maybe chapter 3 or 4. So I think at this point I was still button mashing. I know I wasn't rolling because I think I was just blocking at that point.
The reason why I was rolling was because he was saying like the Itagaki, he made it so you couldn't cancel your combo or your animation. So I'm used to maybe Batman combat or like where you can kind of like mid swing you can like cancel what you're doing into something else, and so like I would be swinging on somebody and then hitting the block button to try to block on somebody hitting me from behind, and I'm taking damage, and like that took me that was one of the things that was most frustrating in the first like beginning of me playing this game, was that I couldn't figure out why I couldn't block, and it wasn't until Dante told me, he was like, yeah, you can't, like, this isn't a modern game, like you can't do that. You have to,
well, I wouldn't go as far as saying it's not a modern game. I think it's just a style of game. Dark Souls does the same thing.
I want to say in Devil May Cry you're able to cancel like attack animations in the roll, but I can't remember for sure.
I'm assuming you can because of how he can in Marvel. You can probably bolt cancel something.
It's more frame based in Devil May Cry. Like certain attacks you can cancel into other attacks.
Yeah.
So that was something that took me a little bit getting used to these first couple of chapters, where I'm like, I ended up just trying to roll a lot more because I was like, man, every time I try to block, it doesn't block. And I figured like being on the move is better than blocking. Like me blocking, especially like playing this guy, when I found out he had a command grab, and it was just kind of like, so if I block, I can still take damage with the command grab, and so like that kind of not frustrated me, but that got to me a little bit, got in my head a little bit, so it kind of changed up how I was approaching other enemies based off of the boss fight. So
at this point, were you aware that you could, I guess, hold L while you're rolling and go directly into a block?
Nope. I didn't know you could do that till now.
Yes. Wow. See, there's a lot of things that are kind of sketchy about your, like, from your post, about you not being able to counter and stuff, and I'm just wondering if you're doing it wrong.
See, that goes back to the tutorial. teaching
exactly
you the basics, but
and
not going anywhere beyond
And a
that.
scroll that tells you exactly how to counter.
I think the thing is like the this is like maybe one of my major gripes with the game is that I'm new to this particular genre of game, and it's on me or this podcast, whatever, for this being like the game that we're playing. So me not having the knowledge of playing all these other games to kind of delve deeper into beyond the surface level of what they're telling me that it's possible. So like it wasn't until like it I don't recall seeing a kunai that had told me that about the ultimate at all. And I don't know if you saw one, Trevor, but it blew my mind when Dante told me that you could do that. Because I was like, I didn't know. And granted, if I would have went into the techniques and scrolled down, I would have seen that, oh, if you hold Y, this happens or this happens. But I had no idea until I scrolled all the way down. And
Yeah, I didn't see it until I think you get the second one, which is like the Art of Inferno, the one that shoots the
no,
birds.
not the ninpo, the holding the
Oh
Y
yeah,
attack.
I definitely didn't know anything about that.
Yeah, so like, and that's something that you have access to, like, I guess from the very beginning, but like, and I guess this is May being wanting to be pampered or babied or whatever, which I don't care, like, fine, you can put that on me, but there is a few things in this game that I was not aware were even possible until somebody told me, because I would have never figured it out. Like, honestly, like, if it wasn't for me posting about playing this game, I would have not hit the halfway point, because I was like, I'm playing the game the way I'm playing the game, and I'm butting heads into it, and I just figured it was a hard game, so that's why I wasn't making the progress that I wasn't making. But then people were saying, do this, or do this, and do this, and then, like, it just made the game so much easier, in a sense. And so it's a little frustrating because Dante had a really good introduction of this game, and he said something along the lines that I think he said that Itagaki had purposely tried to make it so you're fighting living, breathing, AI or whatever, and then like I'm trying to fight this character this way, and then all the information that people are giving me is like, here's how you trick the enemy, or here's how you just bypass this whole thing, and like it kind of makes the experience a little bit more I guess less
Trivial?
no, I mean, it makes it easier, which I'm not sad about, but it doesn't necessarily feel like I'm the one doing the things now. I'm like performing what people have told me to do, which it's a weird thing to complain about, but like I don't know how you get past this game without Flying Swallow. Like I can't imagine how much more time it would take me to play this game without Flying Swallow and without the Azuna drop. Like, I did not know how important those two things are. And you definitely can play this game without doing that. But I know, like, me as a player, I couldn't imagine how much time it would, like, how many more hours I'd put in this game if I had just stuck with using the Lunar. Which, that's, like, my preferred weapon. But it sounds like that's not the way I should play this game.
Dude, So, originally I was a Dragon Sword only type of dude. That was, like, my go-to weapon. But the more I play this game, the more I get into, like, the other just, I don't want to say niche weapons, but, like, the more unique weapons. And Lunar is really, really good.
Yeah.
The point that I found interesting that you just said, and it kind of brought me to something I wanted to mention earlier. So, in the Hurricane packs, those DLCs they had for the original Ninja Gaiden, they introduced the Lunar, and they introduced a lot of new enemies. A lot of those new enemies, in fact, I don't think any of the new enemies that they introduce get introduced on normal when you're playing Ninja Gaiden Black.
Mm-hmm.
So if you play hard, you have these new enemies, and one of the major complaints people had about vanilla Ninja Gaiden was how Flying Swallow was pretty overpowered in a lot of situations, at least early game. So they introduce a lot of enemies that counter that specific move. And they also have... this is something I learned by streaming the game and having some speedrunners in the chat. They said some of the enemy AI, they actually detect when you land your Izuna drop, and they can go directly into a throw. So there's a lot of stuff they did to balance this game over the course of Hurricane Pack 1 and Hurricane Pack 2 that you don't see unless you play on hard or above.
So it's almost
really
like a balance patch, like in game. Like they had the regular version, then they saw a lot of people, I guess, gave feedback, and then they updated it with the black version to kind of.
Yeah, it's a lot of interesting stuff. Like a lot of AI was modified. I think they did a couple damage tweaks on certain weapons. One weapon we haven't got to, in the original, it would drain your health, and I didn't know this until somebody told me during one of my streams. But in Black, they patched it so it doesn't drain your health. So that was a weapon I would have never used, and now I'm like, well, this
because you thought it drained your health, or
no? Like in the original, it did drain your health.
So why wouldn't you have used it?
Because health is such a vital thing in this game.
Oh, what I'm saying, I thought you said in Black it doesn't.
Yeah, in Black it doesn't, and I didn't know that until the streamer told me.
Oh, so you thought it still drained your health?
Yeah.
I gotcha.
I just instantly assumed.
Gotcha. Do you kind of get what I'm saying though? Like I'm eternally grateful that people have been helping me out, but it kind of showed me like, man, like, what was I on thinking that what I could do would work? Like, I don't know if you ran into that too, Trevor.
I see where you're coming from, because it's kind of like, with this type of game, you expect there to be multiple paths to success, especially with the amount of weapons and items that you have at your disposal. And then for people to tell you, oh, this is the best way to do it. And it's like, infinitely much easier than any other way of doing it. Is kind of just like, well, maybe that's the way they intended you to play this game.
Like, it's still possible to do it. Like, I'm not saying, like, and I don't necessarily have to do exactly what people are telling me to do or whatever, but, like, I think specifically because we're playing this for a podcast and it's a time crunch, it makes more sense if I get stuck trying to do things my way to go ahead and do it the way somebody has told me to. Like, if time was no object and I was playing this game on my own, I probably wouldn't have posted about it, and so I would still be playing with the Lunar, trying to do things the way I want to do it. The one thing I will say is that it has opened me up to switching my weapons more, because like when I see certain enemies now, I'm like, okay, these type of enemies surround me, so like that was why I used the Lunar, because I was having issues with enemies surrounding me, and that has the best or the widest range, or the biggest range between the sword and the Lunar, the bow staff basically. And so that's why I opted for that, because I could almost cover like a full 360 around my character and not get hit. Whereas with the sword, it's very like targeted, like you're fighting one enemy. So like I was having issues with the sword against the spider ninjas because those guys just surround you, and me hitting one at a time was not doing it for me. So, and then bosses, like I almost always just go to sword right away just because of how strong Flying Swallow was. So
I think it's kind of like a fighting game situation where it's almost like you could think of the sword as Ryu, and he's like the most versatile, or the sword's the most versatile thing. It's very balanced. It works in most situations. But then kind of once you get a certain level of adeptness, the other stuff comes into play. And bosses I would have never thought of using like the Lunar for or like the flails for, I now have that option to do that.
Gotcha. Is that something that I don't know, Greg, like, do you, and even you, Dante, do you find yourselves, now that you've played this game for the umpteenth time or whatever, are you experimenting with things that you haven't done before, or are you guys just kind of playing the game the way you always have?
For me, I've definitely been trying to use a lot of the other weapons. Like, so when I originally played the game, I used the flails a lot, and Lunar. So for the most part, like, I think I stick to Dragon Sword if I'm just trying to like power through something. So like, I use that for a chunk of the game, but for sure, against some of the other enemies, I'll experiment a little bit as far as like, only trying to counter and kill with that, or trying to. And so the other thing I forgot to talk about. Do you guys know the scoring system in this game? Being able to see, bring that up and see like how you're doing as far as your overall score in the middle of a mission.
I think Dante told us like 3 days ago.
Yeah.
Okay. So the thing I'm always trying to do is make sure I get like the highest score possible every time.
The time bonus.
Yep. So trying to experiment just to make sure I can do that.
Any score-based game I play, like where combos and you get a rank at the end, I'm just terrible at. Like I just I always get like the lowest or second lowest rank, so I kind of just was like, I just want to get through the level. That would be more impressive to me. I don't care what kind of rank I get.
Yeah, I would be experimenting more, and I have actually been probably using more weapons than I'm typically used when I play this game. But one, since we're playing it for a podcast and time is kind of a thing, and two, I'm trying to get through this game twice, I'm not experimenting as much as I would or as I'd like to. So I've been using the Lunar a lot more than I used to. Been using the flails, and I've always been a fan of them. But just to get those time bonuses and stuff, I've been using the Dragon Sword.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess we can move forward a little bit in the story. Chapter 2, I think it starts off with, like, I think the character Ryu sees his village is on fire or whatever, or he's informed by Ayane, the female ninja that's been throwing the kunais. And he gets to his village and, like, he sees some of his fellow, is it Hayabusa clan or Hayabusa ninjas are dead or injured, and so he ends up fighting a bunch of dudes that were the cause of this. So he fights some new enemy types like the samurais, which I think they are like the first enemy that's introduced that does play more defensive and blocks your attacks. Then they have these mages, which are these guys that can teleport and shoot fireballs at you. And then they have horsemen that have spears. And I think the bow, your a ranged weapon that you can use besides your ninja stars are introduced, as well as the lunar, which is the bow staff that we've seemed to all like. And this kind of this is.
This was that first wake-up call where I started seeing like Facebook posts.
Yes, but beyond that too, not even talking about the level. This made me realize a thing, and I keep using this term "modern game," and I'm not trying to use it as a pejorative. So I'm going to try to say something different or try to not use the term as much. But one of the things I noticed, and this is where it becomes apparent, is there's not a button or something you can do to swap weapons on the fly. And this is when I realized you had to pause and go through the menu. And I think that, I just said I'm not going to use the term that often, but I think that is one of the, downsides of this game now, playing it in 2018. I think that like they were working within the confines of what they could in 2005, but I think if they were to remaster this game, that would be something that I would want them to change.
I actually had that exact same thought.
Like maybe even like map it to the D-pad, like
That's literally what they do in Ninja Gaiden 2.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So like it didn't come into play for me in this particular level because like once I picked up Lunar, I was using that all the time, and I was stuck on the horseman until Dante told me, like, oh, yeah, use your bow, which I hadn't swapped to because I had just picked it up. And, which is stupid of me because obviously when you pick up a new weapon, obviously that's going to come into play in video games, right? So that simplified that fight. But that was something that I ran into later on in this game where it was like, man, like I've been using the sword and the lunar a lot more recently, and like I have to pause and go through the menu in order to switch, and it kind of briefly takes you out of the action, which is, it's not as bad since you're not playing like a high octane offensive style game or combo heavy game, you are a lot more defensive, like blocking and rolling and trying to avoid taking damage. So it's a little bit like at least pausing is not like fully taking you out of that, but that would have been something I'd like to see them improve or fix if they were to ever remaster this game. Trevor, what's up?
Yeah, I was just gonna echo that same sentiment, like having to deal with going into the menu, because I think I remember Dante
to even heal.
yeah, I think I remember Dante telling me to use the bows on the horsemen, and like it just wasn't happening. And the other thing, going along with what you would change about this game, the other thing I would change is the bow. Like, for some reason, I could never get the hang of switching between aiming and quick firing, and I still haven't figured it out.
You're going to need that for the rest of your chapter you're on.
I mean, he knows. Yeah. I have the same exact issue. And so,
I got to ask Greg, do you have problems aiming the bow?
It's not super precise, like, for sure. It's a little, like, later on, yeah, you do have to get used to, like, finessing it a little bit, but there's definitely times where I was trying to aim it, and, like, I'm thinking I'm on point with it, but it's just off, and then you try and, like, move it a little bit, and then it's too much, and then you try and, like, keep trying to find adjustment, but, yeah, I think that was, like, the only issue I had with it.
That's fair. Like, specifically the last quote-unquote boss fight we'll talk about, you have to aim the bow quite a bit.
That whole last level.
I'd miss the first shot on something, but then I wouldn't miss any shot after that. So
I just
find it really
you always have to use that first shot as a guide.
Yeah, it's definitely like a barometer.
For like the auto targeting for most of the bosses that you needed against, I felt like that was pretty good for the most part. I mean, I guess it's a little wonky against the horse.
Well, my issue is trying to get it to quick fire.
So, like, when I first got the bow, I think me and Trevor probably ran into the same issue where I was trying to quick fire, but I kept going into first person. And then I'm just, like, stuck there, like, wait, what the heck is going on? Not knowing how to get out of it and then taking damage. And then when I figured out how to quick fire, I was trying to always do that, but I couldn't 100%. Like, I don't necessarily, like, I was telling Trevor, like, this is what I do, and it was not necessarily working for him. And, like, even when I got back into the game, I couldn't 100% always do it that way.
I think I remember.
Is quick fire just standing B?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Just making sure.
I think I remember during, like, the speed run during SGDQ, they were saying that it's kind of like glitchy, that it doesn't work all the time. The quickfire won't always like go to, aim at the target that you need it to.
Yeah, and I think a part of that, and it's very apparent, at least for me, in the this last mission, chapter 9, which we'll get to. But I don't want to harp on it too much right now, but the auto aim, I had issues with it, the quick fire. And then I think part of that had to do with the camera, which I think we need to get a little bit farther before we delve into that.
What amazes me, though, is the shuriken, when you throw it, is really precise. But for some reason, the quick fire with the bow isn't precise.
Like, it's so frustrating. I like both, even the... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think they're different projectiles, so...
Well,
the shuriken are pretty much like a guaranteed thing.
I'm just saying on, like, a technical level, like, the precision of it is more on point, whereas the bow... I don't know if they intended to do that, but it just seems like it's not right if they were able to get...
What I'm saying is, I think the shuriken are tracking, whereas the bow is, if you aim... and something standing there, we're going to hit it, but if it moves, we can't guarantee anything for it.
I'm cool with that, but I like the explosive shuriken has more range than the bow.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was like, did we stop? What happened? Like, the explosive shuriken, I could make that auto lock on or whatever, auto aim, quick fire that with a way higher percentage of hitting my intended target than I could with the bow.
Gotcha.
And I could not for the life of me understand that.
There was some times where they did dodge my like incendiary shuriken, but it doesn't happen as much as the bow, I guess.
I mean, I'm just talking about like stationary targets. Like anytime I saw a dude like on a turret, I would swap over to incendiary or explosive shurikens, and I could hit them 100% no time. But if I was low on that, like usually what I try to do is you can hold a max of 15 of all these projectile items, and if I was under 5, I was like, I should hold on to these in case I actually really, really need them. So I swapped to the bow, and then I would end up like quick firing like 2 or 3 arrows and not hitting them. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, what's going on?
Huh.
And it's so frustrating.
That's an interesting thing. I didn't.
And I wonder if it's just if maybe it's a balancing decision because some of the like once you get the strong bow and then you get the other arrows later on in the game, maybe they thought that was going to be too good. So
I have no idea. I have no idea. But
go ahead.
I would just say it was very frustrating because it was like this thing like just on a cost. You know, an arrow is 10 essence, and I think an explosive shuriken was like 100. So it was like, I guess like, oh, me shooting these 3 arrows in the grand scheme of things, I'm only losing like 30 essence. I'm only using 30 essence. But it was just like very frustrating where it was like, I got this thing because I wanted to, use it, and it's not working as it should.
I was going to ask Greg, you've played Ninja Gaiden 2, right?
Yeah.
Did you think you could charge the bow in this game? Like, did you think you could UT the bow? Because I sure did, because that's something they added in.
Yeah. I forgot about that. It didn't even occur to me to even like try that in this game or think about it. But yeah, I forgot that was a thing in Ninja Gaiden 2.
All right,
that was just a funny aside.
So so this chapter 2, you get the Lunar and you get the bow, and you get to fight Masakado, which is I guess he's like a samurai on a horse, and his goons are the mage enemies that you fought that can teleport and throw fireballs, and you fight these guys on a rectangular, like a bridge. It's like basically you're on a bridge and the gates on either side are closed, and this boss gave me issues, so I ended up there was a save point right before this boss, so you could just hop back in after you died. And I think I ended up like stepping away from the game for a day and coming back, and I think finishing it on the next day because I was getting very frustrated with this boss, and I think a lot of it had to do with I feel like you fight. When you're fighting this guy, you're fighting this boss that has this massive life bar who's basically charging at you, and then on the, around in the environment, there are these 2 mages that are throwing fireballs that they charge up at you, and if you get hit by them, you get knocked down, and it's a whole deal. Like you just don't want to get hit by these fireballs, and I think this may have been the first mission or the first boss where I realized this camera is going to be the literal death of me because there is like I don't know if this boss, the camera was tracked your movement, or it kind of always made sure to keep do you remember, Trevor, if it tracked your movement or did it keep the boss on screen at all times, like the focal point?
Boss was definitely not on screen at all times.
No,
okay.
Yeah. And I think part of that, too, is, like, when you're fighting those 2 horses, that was when I realized this camera was trash. It was, like, before you get to, like, the boss fight, because you fight those 2 guys on the horses. And so it's like they're circling around you, so you're trying to keep them in front of you, or at least in most games, that's what I'm used to, is trying to keep your enemy in front of you. But having to use right trigger instead of the left stick, or the right stick in order to move the camera is just kind of counterintuitive.
Can you explain like what the the differences between the two are?
Between using the right trigger and
yeah. So why are you opting to use the right trigger over the right stick?
I think that most games have something like the right trigger where once you hit it, it automatically, goes to a position. The camera automatically goes to a position like behind you. Whereas
centering your character, right.
Whereas this game, that is your only option. But most games also have the option to use the right stick, which allows you to have free control of the camera. And the other thing...
It's still centered around your character, though.
Yeah.
So your character is still centered, but you can rotate the camera around your character or above or below a little bit.
But this game doesn't have that. And even when you use right trigger, I like to actually see a little bit above the character, especially like if I'm trying to jump on the platforms, so I know exactly where the platform is. But this actually moves the camera angle to where it's almost eye level, like it's parallel with the ground. And
it's
that's
like
just
the worst angle for platforming.
Yeah, that's not my preferred way to play any third-person games.
I wish there was a way you could lock the camera onto the character in some situations. My issue that I had was the right trigger, or I'm sorry, the right stick didn't rotate quick enough. So your character could move faster than the camera tracked. So like when you were trying to rotate the camera to keep like these two horsemen on the screen with you, it's kind of like you have to like either move your character the same way that the enemies are moving in order to keep up, because there's no way that the camera was going to be able to keep up with you. The right stick is useful a little bit if you are going around corners, but it also is a nuisance in that sense too, because whenever you're in a tight corridor or a hallway when you're fighting, you almost like you cannot use the right stick because it moves so slow. The camera moves so slow with the right stick that you 100% have to use the right trigger in order to center the camera. And the issue that I have is like in these tighter corridors, like it's going to center it behind your character, but if you're not necessarily looking down the hallway, you still could potentially not see everybody that you're, on screen. So like it's just kind of like a crapshoot. So there are many times, like not necessarily in this level, but there are many times where you basically run around a corner with no line of sight. So you just assume you're going to get jumped. Or even like when you walk into a room, the camera pans it so it shows you opening the door, and then you're seeing it. Basically, you're seeing your character enter into the room. And then I had to quickly I held block immediately and hit right trigger in order to recenter the camera behind me. Like some of the camera angles they give you in this game just blow my mind. Like I'm not saying they weren't purposely done, or I wonder if this was a way for them to make it more challenging or whatever, or just playing with the camera angles, because that wasn't necessarily something, I don't know, maybe that's not something games focused on back then. I have no idea, but it's very frustrating, and specifically with this boss, centering these two mage enemies while also trying to keep track of this horseman that is way off in the distance or rushing you. It was sometimes it was a tall order, and this chapter kind of forces you to learn how to deal with these cameras, for good or for bad. Do you guys have anything with the camera? I think it's something that me and Trevor are still dealing with. I know Dante doesn't necessarily have the same issues that we have. So
I didn't really have a big issue with the camera, as far as a lot of the combat in the early part of the game. Once you have to start doing platforming, it's a bit annoying then. But in general during combat, it's not great, but I didn't I don't know. I didn't find myself taking like a lot of unnecessary damage or like having like, you know, really like kind of cheap deaths. I felt like because of the camera. It was only when you had to actually like do platforming when it was like, okay, this is kind of annoying.
Yeah, whenever there's platforming, and we'll get into some of those sequences, that's when I normally have complaints with the camera. As far as combat scenarios go, like specifically with the one that we're talking about right now, the Chapter 2 boss, there is a balance to it where part of me thinks they designed it so you have to kind of micromanage that fight. So essentially the boss, he literally goes one direction, his horse does this thing, turns around, goes the other direction, turns around, goes back the other direction. So I think what they wanted you to do was to just always kind of keep that in mind. Okay, he's off screen. I know he's going to come back to me. Will I be ready for him when he comes back to me and act accordingly? There was one other thing I wanted. As far as it being modern or not, it definitely doesn't fit within the confines of an Assassin's Creed, Batman, even a Bayonetta. But I really just don't think the right stick would work for this game. Or, the right stick. I don't think the right stick would work for this game if those games were as intense and as aggressive as this one is. So, for the genre, or at least for the game they were making, I think they had to do the right trigger solution. Just because if you had like a Batman Arkham Asylum or an Assassin's Creed where it wasn't just like these one-on-one bar fights that you're constantly participating in, then I think you'd see the difficulty of just relying on the right stick in those games as well.
I think my change for that would literally just to be to make the camera with the right stick move 2 to 3 times faster. I think that would like resolve some of my tracking issues where I could make sure I can keep the enemies that are moving on screen, and I could like quickly flip the camera, because a lot of like using the...
You don't think that would take your focus off of the combat?
Would
you be able to handle what you're dealing with and manipulate the camera?
I mean, like, you're saying that like I'm not blocking, you know? Like,
No, I'm not. But I'm saying like stuff grabs you, and my personal thing is if you did open up the right stick and like you made it the quote unquote perfect right stick, I still think that would be a lot for the player to manage.
I think when you say a lot, do you think that makes the game harder or like over? Like, what do you mean? Because isn't that the point?
I don't think the game would get easier.
That's fine though. I don't want to fight my enemies and the camera. And I feel like you are saying that I would continue to fight the camera, and I don't necessarily know if that's true. And like, I think that there are more instances where I died because the camera wasn't where I wanted it to be than I would have liked. I'm not saying like a lot of the times that I died were me just messing up in combat, but there are a couple times where I died or I took damage that I don't feel like I should have taken because of the camera. And especially when we're talking about some of the platforming sections. Not that necessarily rotating the camera would have helped in those situations, but there are like those are prime examples of adjusting the camera or, you know, using the tools that they provide you isn't enough. You know.
Now that I think about it, to add on to what Dante said about maybe being able to freely control the camera angle wasn't the right solution, because with some of the moves that Ryu uses, it actually puts you in a different position. Like even with the flying swallow, like when you use that attack, if you were to have control of the camera with the right stick, you would be facing the opposite direction of the enemy. And so with stuff like that, I guess I can see how it's more beneficial to still have the camera angle so that you can see where the enemy is. But in other situations when you're more defensive, you might be wanting to strafe or move while looking in a different direction, and that's just not possible with the right trigger.
I mean, I guess
I'm definitely not trying to say that more options isn't better. I'm just questioning if it would be the benefit.
The happy
or you would
medium.
reap the benefits.
The happy medium would be when they do the remaster, make it so you can switch the camera speed and then throw a photo mode in too. So like at the very least, if you can change the camera mode or camera angle and you know kind of disorient yourself the camera when you're doing an attack, at least make it so you can take cool pictures. How about that?
Cut us the check, Team Ninja.
There we go. Masakato, did you have any issues with this boss, Trevor?
This was probably one of the most frustrating parts of the game. It was this one and another point in the game that were frustrating, and for me, it was mostly just because of the teleporting ninjas, like while they're shooting at you.
The mages, yeah.
Yeah, because I was mostly focusing on the boss on the horse, and which I will say I like the character design for him, and it got me really enthusiastic about the rest of this game after seeing him, but yeah, it was just the mages that bothered me.
And one quick thing before we go into Chapter 3. I thought it was really interesting hearing you guys talk about this boss, hearing the people like respond to Marqus's Facebook post about the boss, and how I handled the boss. So, you ended up using Lunar for the boss, right, Marqus?
Yeah, so I was trying my hardest to just focus on the boss, and it proved to be like a fruitless endeavor. So what I ended up doing on my successful run was focus on the mages and just kill all the mages. And I don't know how many there were because they just kept respawning. But after a while, I killed them all, and then I could just focus solely on the Masakato, and then that made it a lot easier.
Yeah. And when I played this game originally, I remembered having a significant amount of difficulty with this boss, but going in with the knowledge that I have now of like just playing the game and how strong ultimate techniques were, I pretty much killed 2 of the mages at a time, maybe even only 1, because if you get a blue essence, you go straight to your level 2. So I'd kill 1, charge it up, and wait for the boss to head towards me. And if you hit him with an ultimate technique, that takes about a third of his life away. So, over the course of 15 years, the way I've played this game has continued to change.
That's cool. You want to go into Chapter 3? Cool.
Let's do it.
All right. So Chapter 3,
Well, what happens at the end of Chapter 2?
Tell me.
You die. And not just in the game over since.
Can I be honest with
I'm
you?
still confused.
Yeah,
Okay.
The only part of the story I know is you got a sword, and then there's a good sword and a bad sword. That's all I know.
So to pretty much summarize the end of Chapter 2, your, I don't want to say love interest, but like one of your childhood friends, Kureha, she gets killed by Lord Doku, who has stolen the Dark Dragon Blade. You go to confront him, he pretty much slices you in 2, and you're just kind of left there dying, or seemingly dead.
Oh, that's the samurai dude with the fire as the head, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So he pretty much kills you. You see a falcon come, and he's just kind of like lingering over your body. And then I think it fast forwards, and you see Ryu okay, and he's just kind of got this new outfit, setting himself up for a battle that's about to come. And he hops on a blimp to get into the Vigorian Empire.
Yeah, and so this is where Chapter 3 takes place, and this is when I realized, oh, like, you're gonna just be all over in this game, and, like, this is where, like, the first 2 chapters seem like the, you know, the traditional, like, feudal Japanese aesthetic with the way that the enemies and the just the environment. And but this chapter, you're fighting on like an airship, and then they have like you're fighting soldiers and dudes with riot shields and guns, and I'm like, oh, like this is not what I expected at all, and like I appreciate the variety / diversity of the environments and the enemies. It's good and bad. Like I said, the good part is like it always keeps you on your toes, and you get to fight a whole gang, a horde of enemies. But then the bad thing is that if you're having issues with combat, like I was having, like it's just more and more.
You never get comfortable.
Yeah, you never quite get comfortable. That's a good way of putting it. It's more and more puzzles that they're throwing at you that you have to solve in order to progress. And
hang on, puzzles.
Yes, puzzles. Did these characters not stop and make you think, Trevor? Come on, man.
Hey, man, he's just mashing as hard as possible.
Yeah, so like it's just like that. That's how I see it. All these encounters are like when you fight a new enemy type for the first time. Like in most games, it's just kind of like, well, F it, I'm just gonna go in and do my thing. Like these guys aren't that tough. But this game, it actually puts you on the defensive all the time, and so like I'm like trying to feel my way out in this fight and kind of see what this enemy can and can't, what they do, how they react to certain things, if they block. If they're aggressive, like there are so many more things to take into consideration in this game. So like I do think that is a testament to like the way they designed the combat in this game. But like I said, like the flip side of that is you never quite get too comfortable because like I said, any encounter you have could be your last, and it's especially frustrating to like progress through like 2 or 3 different types of enemies for the first time to then die and have to do it over again, where like I don't necessarily like it's not fun. That part isn't fun for me, and like it should be easier the second, the third, the fourth time, but like depending on how far I got and just like how my time playing this game has gone, I'm like could potentially be on tilt
levels.
Yeah, I could potentially be on tilt by the time I have to fight these basic these fodder enemies at this point for the 15th time, because that definitely happened in a upcoming chapter. Yeah, fighting on this airship. Well, do you have anything you need to say about any of that, Trevor, Dante, Greg? Because I don't want to. It's not just about me.
No, not really.
What do you think about the up before the boss part of the airship? Is there anything interesting that, aside from there is one cheap death in there, where you have to go out on this like tightrope?
Oh,
and, like,
yeah.
Did anybody not get got by that?
I got
yeah, he got me off guard.
Wait, which tightrope?
So like there's a you're supposed to, I think, power down the airship, or I don't remember something. So you
Destroy the engine room.
Have to get on this tightrope that you like. What do you hold on to, and you kind of shimmy across. And,
I remember that.
Those enemies come from the other side where you're at, and they shoot at you with guns. If they hit you, you drop and automatically fall to your death.
Yeah, this is part 2 of the Terrible Bow Chronicles.
Come on, man! That little passageway they were in is only like 1 person wide.
Nah, he's right though.
Like every time I tried to aim, they would shoot at me, and I would go back out to third person.
Okay, that part is annoying. Getting shot out of first person mode.
Oh yeah, that does happen a lot. Yep.
So I don't know. I don't remember that happening to me. I know there was times where I was taking damage while I was in first person mode, and it didn't actually like take me out of it. But
now that you mention it, I think it has to do with the amount of damage you take.
Okay.
Because during the tank fight, that definitely happens. Spoiler alert. There's a tanky fight. But I didn't get knocked out of it.
Yeah.
But here, I definitely got knocked out of it.
Yeah. And then, so this boss, how'd you guys feel about General Dynamo? Trevor?
Sundowner's brother?
Basically. Like, this dude has a big, like, laser cannon. He kind of, like, you're fighting him on top of the airship, and he kind of just stands in the center. And I think, like, he just has a big gun. He does a grip of damage if you get shot by it. He has a command grab. He can throw up a shield. So, like, he's kind of a tricky opponent. It took me quite a few attempts in order to beat him, but I think you were struggling with him, Trevor, weren't you?
Not really struggling.
So you weren't playing this game on Chapter 3 for 2 days. Okay.
Man, I don't know how long it took me to finish any of these because I was pausing and changing diapers and coming back and having to start from the beginning.
Man, you had to wear a diaper to play this game?
The level lower than Ninja Dog is Ninja Baby.
I think the only thing I didn't like about this, and it pretty much just took trial and error to kind of figure out his moves. I think this is...
his patterns.
Yeah, I think this enemy has the easiest patterns to figure out of all the bosses. But he has a very long reach, and Dante didn't tell me this until after I gotten past him when I was trying to fight another enemy, that the best way to dodge is to roll jump, and I was just rolling, and I could never figure out how he was still hitting me even after rolling.
How did you dodge those lasers? Because you don't have any momentum if you just like regular roll and don't roll.
You can just run.
Yeah, I was just running. Like I didn't have to. Yeah. I didn't have to roll on those lasers.
Yeah, I didn't know about roll jump till Chapter 8.
What?
Yeah,
that was like pretty much how I always, just roll jump. The only reason is because it's not like you can roll into another roll immediately, right?
No, but I didn't know that you could roll jump till Chapter 8. So, yeah, this game is, yeah.
And I guess that was just ingrained in.
On a kunai?
Say that again.
Do you think that should have been on a kunai?
You know what? Probably to spite you. Nah, like I don't know. Like I'm not.
I was only being half condescending.
I know, but like I don't. I honestly don't think that it really
Maybe
mattered.
I just play around with the controls more than.
Yeah, but I don't think it really mattered. Like as far as I know, like the parts where I died because I suck, and not because I didn't have roll jump.
But the roll jump is pretty pivotal for dodging a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I just assume I sucked. So
a lot of times those command grabs you guys said you were getting caught by, and like you'd block something and then roll, and then you'd still get grabbed. I'm like, why aren't they roll jumping away from those?
Yeah, I didn't know you could do it. So like,
I think the only reason I even still do it is I think it was just ingrained in my muscle memory from playing the game before. I don't even remember why I did it when I first played the game. But yeah, it was. I guess it's just kind of that. As soon as I started playing it again, it was just
like memory. Like I honestly I never jumped in this game, even like until you guys told me how important the flying swallow was. Unless it was like wall running or like specifically having to jump for a puzzle, I just never jumped in the game. I just stayed grounded and rolled or blocked. We just play games different, man.
Yeah, I mean it works, and I think that's a testament to the amount of play styles this game offers.
Yeah, definitely. I just wasn't trying to get anti-aired, man. So. Chapter.
You just want those command grabs.
Yeah, man. I've probably seen every single command grab in the game at this point, or thus far. Yeah, every other enemy has a command grab. Like, trust me, I've seen.
Can we just take a second to talk about how many moves all of the enemies have?
Oh yeah, I mean, like I think
because I'm still figuring out moves.
I think every enemy has like the normal enemies. I think they have like 3 to 7 moves. I guess it just depends on the enemies you see. And the bosses, I think it's maybe a little bit the same, 3 to 7, or maybe I should say it's 3 to 5 for the regular enemies, and probably 3 to 7 for the bosses or in the sub bosses. But I mean, it's cool. It's a little frustrating though, because like I have been hit with some, like, you fight this enemy 2 or 3 times and you don't necessarily see whatever move they're doing until like the 3rd or 4th time, and like that was always very frustrating when it was like I didn't even know they had that. Especially with the bosses
like
too.
They've been sitting on it.
Yeah, especially with the bosses too, where you're having issues dealing with this attack, and then you finally figure those out. Then you get hit with this 3rd thing, and it's like, holy crap, man! How many moves do you got? Chapter 4, Imperial City Infiltration. I think this one. I don't even remember what's the reason he goes to the Imperial City.
Because that's where. Oh, go ahead.
I just was saying to Tyron.
So he needs to get into Vigor, if I recall, and that's where Doku is. So he's just kind of trying to like meander his way to Doku at this point.
In this level,
and I think he's trying to find more information, which Ayane says he can find at Hanspar.
Yeah, so like this level is you're dropped into, and this is more like the feudal Japan style city. This is like an open world. This is like the hub world for the game, and this is good and bad because I've found, or people have said, that it's very easy to get lost in this part of the game, and enemies respawn. Like they'll respawn, so you never clear out. Like the previous chapters, you could keep visiting an area, backtracking, and not having to fight enemies. But in this open world, they do respawn, which is good and bad. It's good if you need to quickly build essence or build your life back, but it's also bad if you're just quickly trying to get to the other side of the city for this thing. You keep getting stopped or slowed down by enemies, and it's bad if you suck at combat.
Ninjas.
Yes. Spider ninjas, and this is where we fight the infamous spider ninjas, which are the worst characters in this game. Trevor, how bad are the spider ninjas?
Dishonorable.
Have you ever had an enemy make you more salty, just like a regular commoner?
Like in this game?
No, in any game.
Excluding bosses.
Not that I can think of. Because I would at least be able to look up a guide and see, but I guess one, and I guess is, to their benefit, the developer of this game, they made the enemies so that, you can't just memorize like their attacks and everything. They're kind of random, or they respond to the character. But,
yep.
Each time you fight them, the fight is different. And
yeah, they switch it up. They're very fast, and this kind of this was the enemy when I read that original quote about how he wanted to make it a game that dealt with reflexes and reacting rather than memorization, and can't remember what other word he said, but these are like the epitome of I just need to react to what they're doing, and I need to do it fast.
Yeah, in multiple instances, they basically just surrounded me and stomped me. They jumped me. That's what they did.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing about them is, like, I don't think they have more HP than, like, any other ninja type. And they only come in, like, clicks of 3 from what I can tell.
No, they come in bigger clicks.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of 4s.
Okay. So, but they come in relatively small clicks. But they will mess you up so fast.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like super active.
The frustrating part. So this chapter, it's not that bad actually in the grand scheme of things. It's a pretty short chapter. You fight your way to the shop and into Han's bar, and it's pretty straightforward. There's not even a boss on this level, right?
No.
It's the next level that these spider ninjas start to be annoying. And like I kind of want to say I don't even think that they had their explosive, their incendiary shurikens, did they?
Oh, they totally did.
Yeah.
I watched Trevor get destroyed
Yeah.
by them.
In chapter 4?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Second you go up that clock
And
tower.
and also
Okay.
to add on to chapter 4, there are a few areas that you can go into that aren't even necessary. And I didn't realize that until looking up like a walkthrough to see exactly which way I was supposed to go, and the person basically just skipped over all the parts where I kept dying.
Isn't that like the good / bad part of the open world, right?
Yeah.
Where them not blocking stuff off is good because it does feel like it's an open world. But then the bad part is you could run into spots where you shouldn't be, sidetracking you basically. Especially like I'm assuming me and you were like the least combat adept of the batch of us, and any additional encounters that we didn't have to fight meant we were just going to be have less life.
Yeah, because there were certain instances where I was getting like combat fatigue, so all I wanted to do was just go to the next part.
Mm-hmm. Yep, been there.
I guess one thing
Go ahead.
I failed to mention. So I've been going through this game on hard, and all of the encounters, literally every single encounter is different than it was on normal. So going way, way back to chapter 1, that room with the little like trick floor or whatever, where you fight the white ninjas for the first time along with the like regular ninjas. The regular ninjas are now white ninjas, and the white ninjas are now spider ninjas. So they get introduced way back in chapter 1. And then in this chapter, they introduce this like half cat, half Anubis enemy that's pretty much designed to counter any aerial game that you have. So they're one of the main things like to counter the flying swallow. And I've always had a big like issue dealing with them. So the second I ran into him, I was like, man, I'm starting to get goosebumps.
This is what Marqus and Trevor were feeling.
Yeah, a little bit. There are certain enemies in this game that just bring up very, very bad feelings.
Yeah. Well, you definitely fight more spider ninjas in chapter 5. City of Fiends. You're still in the city of Tyro, and I think this is the chapter that introduced Rachel, right?
Yeah, right at the end of chapter 4.
And she's like, what is she to Ryu?
So, she's a general fiend hunter. That's the first time they've encountered one another, from what I can tell. The reason you even run into her, like right when you open Han's bar up, you see her fighting this dinosaur creature, which you'll eventually fight in the next chapter. But she pretty much one-shots it, and they go into a conversation, and they're like, yeah, the fiends have kind of been on the loose, and they've been more rampant recently. And then she sees something up, like, off in the distance, and grapple hooks away to fight it.
And can you quickly say what a fiend is?
Fiends are pretty much the demonic enemies that you run into in the game. And from what I remember, they are modified humans, or like corrupted humans, something like that.
I think I did read that part where it says something like they're formerly human or something like that.
Yeah, and then there's 3 greater fiends, and those are the humans that were able to like retain their mind even after they've become a fiend.
Okay.
And Rachel claims that her sister is one of them.
So yeah, this is... Wait, what? What was that?
I
Okay.
didn't say anything.
So, this chapter 5, you're still in Tehran, and you're just basically trying to get to this monastery, and to get access to Doku, and this is the first chapter that I thought this was going to be the end for me, because this is a pretty lengthy chapter. There are a gang of spider ninjas, and so I just could not, for the life of me, figure out how to deal with them. And I think this was the chapter where I was I learned how to flying swallow, and I learned the importance of like swapping weapons out and things like that. So I learned then the Azuna drop as well. So I think there's a save point, and you end up fighting like 1, 2, 4 groups of no, 3 groups of spider ninjas, a group of SWAT guys, and a group of like regular soldiers. And then you fight the fiends, which are the 3 dinosaur-like creatures that Rachel was fighting. And I remember the first time I fought them, I was like, oh, I'm fighting 3 of them. That makes sense, there's no life bar or whatever. And I ended up dying to them. And then when I realized how much of the game I had to go back, I think you end up, like I said, you go back like 5 encounters back to your save point. And it was so frustrating. And I think that put me so much on tilt. And like, I think this chapter ended up taking me like, this particular section maybe took me 2 hours to do. And it was so frustrating. I remember like posting like, I played this game for an hour and made 0 progress. And
it got to the point where you didn't even want to take advice from people. You're like,
yeah, like it was so like, oh my God, like it. And the most messed up part was this is the first chapter you've played where there wasn't a save point before the boss. So they purposely wanted you to have to fight these 5 groups of enemies. And it was so frustrating because I was like, why would they do that? Like they've shown that they are, at least nice enough or, to allow you to save before the boss. Why on this chapter can you not do it? And like it really gave me like a love-hate relationship with how they place the save points in this game. And this is maybe the first point where it stands out for me. But it was just so frustrating. And then, of course, I finally kill the dinosaurs after 2 hours of playing, and then you have to fight the Hydracubus, and it's this tentacle monster. And like ultimately, I learned this after another hour and a half of playing that it is probably the easiest boss in this game. However, the lead up to it was so frustrating, and like when I died on him, I realized I had to go all the way back and fight the dinosaurs again, and like all those ninjas, and I was so sad. I was like,
isn't it just like the nerve of them?
Exactly. Like, Trevor, back me up, man. Like, how I was stuck on this level for like 4 or 5 real life hours.
Yeah, I got stuck here too. I don't think I was stuck there that long, and that's mostly because I think it was the earlier chapter where you're trying to get to Han's bar. Dante was watching me stream, and he kind of gave me some tips that helped me out, like throughout Tyron, and then the biggest thing was after I died to those dinosaur creatures, the fiends, multiple times. I figured out you could just skip all those enemy encounters that lead up to the boss.
Yep. The other thing that I don't know if they don't tell you this, or I don't know how they tell you this, every single encounter will eventually despawn if you kill them enough. So the soldiers, they go away really quickly. The spider ninjas, I think you'd have to fight them like maybe 2-3 times. But you can get all of those people to despawn.
I feel like even just running past some of those encounters is fairly easy. Like, especially if you know it's not like a necessary encounter, you just kind of run past it.
Especially with the roll jump.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I guess they weren't doing that. I guess so. Then I kind of.
Yep. Was not doing it. So I was fighting everybody.
I'm also curious as far as like healing items. Were you guys running at like a surplus at all, or were you pretty much like always just barely getting by, or just not having enough?
Go ahead, Trevor.
I was on my last dollar with healing supplies. Like,
Man, I feel like on normal the game just throws them at you. Like
Weren't
you
you
just
surprised?
always have
Nah,
them.
man.
I maxed out on chapter 3.
I was trying to make in.
Yeah, there's a point where I had too many. I was just like, and I had to use them. Like,
I can't imagine
ends
playing
me.
this game without having to heal.
Yeah.
Like, I was always like, I tried to make sure that I had one or two healing items for the boss, but best believe that those healing items they would be used during the boss, and that means I'm going into the boss with like 25% life. So like one command grab or 2 hits would kill me every time. And I actually was playing with Dante, or not. We were on Discord when I was playing, and I got so desperate and like for life, I goofed and I went to the store and bought the one that heals you all the way. And I used my last 5,000 essence to do that instead of upgrading my items and all that stuff. And that kind of bit me in the butt.
Yeah, it's always more efficient to use the lesser ones.
Yeah, because at that point, I think it maybe took me 2 of the lesser ones, which are 500 each. So I basically, like, 2 of those would have put me at 90, at least 90% life. So 1,000 essence versus spending my last 5,000. And it just was like, that's how starved I was for life that it made me, I wasn't even thinking clearly.
I also want to just quickly say, I think I taught something to Marqus that might have saved him for the rest of the game, where if you hit start selecting the triggers or whatever, it does a quick reset. And I told him, like, hey, if you get through an encounter and you feel like you've wasted more than you actually wanted to, reset that encounter.
That helped out when, like, I was, like, super, like, enraged. And I could just, like, quickly, like, I don't have to see myself die and all this stuff. So it was very useful for Chapter 5. Just because it was like, I don't want to see you kill me. Let me just restart. It made me feel like I was protecting a little bit of my sanity.
I feel like even the way that they the death animation and just the way that they do it is just purposely like there to just annoy you. Like it's just the sound he makes when he dies, the
slow motion.
Yeah.
Oh.
Very disrespectful. Those ninjas have no honor.
Also, I think this was a point where I taught Trevor about the ultimate techniques.
Yeah, I think that whole chapter was basically where I got a crash course on all the stuff that's useful in this game.
That's wild.
From the game, right?
Isn't it? Hey man, the techniques menu says hold down Y. It even says essence max.
Yeah, did you guys even go and look at the the move list for the weapons once you got them? And
Moveless.
Really?
I don't know if he's. Are you being
dead
serious?
serious.
Wow.
Like, I saw the techniques and combos. I didn't see any moveless.
Well, I guess that's basically what it is. It shows you how to do all the combos and stuff.
I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I didn't until people said, "Man, you just got an Izu to drop and flying swallow," and I couldn't figure out how to do either of them. But then I at least checked to see how to do it, and it wasn't until Dante explained to me. I think I was actually in one of his streams and those speedrunners, and I was like, "How do you flying swallow?" And one of the guys responded and said, "This is how you do it." And I was like, "All right, cool." And then I was like, about to hop on in 20 minutes. I'm out, Dante. And I was able to do it for the first time, like, on purpose. And I was like, oh, that's cool.
So, Greg, this has been something that's bothering me about, like, not how Marqus plays, but, like, he's been having an issue doing something that I don't know why he'd have an issue. It's the counter.
Yeah, I don't know how to counter. I know what you're supposed to do,
really?
But I can't figure out how to do it. Like, when you block and then you hit X or Y in order to do the counterattack.
Yeah.
And I can't do it. I tried.
You're not letting go of block, are you?
Yeah.
Because, like, you hold L, you keep holding L, and then you just hit X.
That's the same thing.
Oh,
I
you
was
hit
doing.
both at the same time?
No, just whatever one you want
So
to
you're
do.
I hit both just because I don't know.
so you're supposed to let go of block?
No, you gotta hold it.
No. You have to hold
So I think that's probably why then.
Oh, so you were trying to let go of block at the time. And
I
then
guess.
press
I mean,
whatever
like,
you needed.
whatever you could do to not do it, that's what I was doing.
And that's what I was doing. Dante had to tell me, like, while I was, getting that crash course, that you don't have to let go of it. You can just hit it as soon as they hit you.
Can you do it with
Actually
any
make
weapon?
things a lot. Yes.
Okay, because I also thought maybe it's because I'm using a lunar. That's why I can't do it. All right, well maybe I'll be able to do it. Probably not, but maybe.
Practice against the imps. That's the easiest one to practice against.
Speaking of imps, the monastery. Why am I saying that? Monastery. Basically, Ryu gets into the monastery, and he's looking for Doku, and he's in search of the hidden passage to the Emperor's palace. And this is where you fight those imps that Dante was alluding to, and they're kind of like sand shrew, like that's what I call them. Is they have these brown characters with these long claws, and they can dig underground, and they pop up and they just try to slash at you. There's also scythe monks. There's ghouls that these are these these large, slow plodding, like zombie-like characters, and they have like slow startup because they have heavier, like two-handed weapons. They have like big axes and big mace, and then plus they have archer types as well. And then the wasp, and I think this might be the longest level in the game. It's well that we played. I don't know in the game. This level, like this is when I finally felt comfortable with combat. Like it took me 6 chapters. I don't know, what is that, like 12 hours?
Wow.
Yeah, it was at least I was in the double digits in hours at this point by the time I got comfortable with combat, and it's I think mostly this is because I learned how to flying swallow. Like if I'm being real, like the brown imps are probably to me the easiest enemy to fight, and the ghouls are like low risk enemies to fight as well. So there was like simpler enemies in this chapter. So like I felt like I finally had time to like bring up my combat a little bit and learn some of the intricacies of combat. And this is a very very lengthy level. You start up in the monastery, and you are fighting a lot of these enemies, and you end up getting into a tunnel, or like going underground, and you're fighting a lot of like bats and those ghouls and all that. And ultimately, it ends with you fighting this massive bone dragon. But even leading up to this, I think this is the first level that has like. Is this the first level that has a lot of the platforming, or is it the next chapter?
It's this chapter leading up to the bone dragon.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a little bit.
So
yeah,
this chapter has some of that platforming we were alluding to. I know one area in particular. You get to the very bottom of this hole. That's when you awaken the spirits, I guess, of the ghouls. So like all the way back up to the center of the hole, you have to kind of go back, trace your steps a little bit, and you're fighting these ghouls that are popping out. And a lot of the platforming along here is pretty whack. Greg, you had something you want to add?
No, just touching on the platform part that you're talking about. So just in that area alone, just trying to start like heading through the underground area. So I died there at least 3 or 4 times, just missing a jump. I was trying to. There's a little part that you, I guess you have to swing on this.
After the boulder chases you?
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot about the boulder chase.
So I died there at least like maybe 3 or 4 times just making a bad jump. Then, even after you fight the bone dragon, this is just me being stupid, I guess. I think Dante already knows what I'm gonna say. So I fought the bone dragon, and you beat him, and then you look down, it shows like the remains of him down there. So I'm like, oh, I just gotta jump down, right? And you jump down, and then you die, and it's like, oh, okay, well, this is the next chapter that I died in, but there's not a save point before you start chapter 7.
Clearly it auto saves after you beat a boss, right?
so then I had to fight the bone dragon
a save
again.
Point within a minute.
Yep.
Above you and below you.
Yep. But I'm just thinking, oh, this is a video game. I killed the boss.
Auto save.
Shows you're supposed to go down there. Let me just jump.
Exact same thing.
See, one of the things I will say, this was something we argued about at the very onset of this game. Marqus is like, they need to have checkpoints after every fight. And I'm like, you really don't want that, bro. Like, if they had a checkpoint after every fight, you would screw yourself in some certain situations.
I would say boss fights.
Boss fights, that would be a little bit more reasonable. But there are definitely times
you use too many healing items or something. Yeah,
Yeah,
in hindsight, I agree. But I think boss fights, like that situation, I didn't die the way these two dum-dums did. These 3 dum-dums. But I want to go back a little bit and let's talk about that boulder chase scene when you first get into the tunnel. Trevor, how do you feel about that boulder chase? Crash Bandicoot style, right?
Been so long since I played Crash Bandicoot.
So, like, you're basically, I mean, it is classic Crash where you are running towards the camera with the boulder behind you, and you're basically reacting to the obstacles, whether it be fallen pillars or spikes in the ground or whatever. And I think I died two times at this point.
Did you die, or did it just send you back?
It sends you back.
Oh,
you take a little bit of damage.
I thought you get run over,
and then it just sends you back. Yeah, but it just sends you back.
Oh.
Which I'm glad y'all brought that up because that was going to be one of my questions. How come they could not add that to other parts of the game? Where it doesn't send you. Because at first I was thinking, oh, well, maybe they, it was just the limitations of the technology and they just send you back to your last save. But nope, they can actually create checkpoints.
Well, I mean, what other platforming part is that?
It doesn't have to be platforming if that's the case. It could it could be fights where like you could literally like, all right, check this out. You died.
Are you saying it?
Do you want to continue? Yes. Okay, then you spawn with less life at that beginning of that encounter again. So you have to fight all the same, like you have to refight all those enemies.
Oh, that would go against the spirit of the game.
How come it didn't go during the platforming section? Did they recognize that it was stupid and they shouldn't have put it in?
I think so. I honestly think so. That part's not good.
I don't know. You're right. It would go against the grain or the design decisions of the game, but it was just very frustrating that
you get like a restart.
Yeah.
And then nothing else.
Oh, it's so frustrating. Go ahead.
How about the Devil's Staircase, where there's the 3 archers that you have to get past on your way? Because I think this is one of the most infamous parts of the game.
Remember when I was telling you there were 2 parts of this game that frustrated me to no extent? This was the other one. This was the big one. I almost quit this game because of this. Like where you're trying to get back up the winding path back up to where you first dropped down, and you have to jump up onto each of the platforms like stair steps. But now that you're coming back up and you've introduced the new enemy types, y'all call them the ghouls, the skeleton guys.
Yeah.
There are skeleton archers
with bows
set up on each of those steps. There's 3 of them. And for some reason, when you're on level ground with them, they will miss you all day. Like, they can't seem to aim straight. But now that you're jumping and trying to platform, they've just got like the best aim in the world, and they can hit you from a mile away while you're in the air.
360,
Exactly.
no scope.
And they knock you off. You can't even get close enough because I tried using the Nimpo against them, and you still have to be close in order to use that. Nimpo has a specific range, and of course I wasn't trying to use the bow because I still didn't have a handle on it. And then I ended up using all my incendiary, or not incendiary, the explosive shurikens. It was just a bad day.
Bad day.
The worst part, in my opinion, this is the first true middle finger Itagaki gave to everybody in the game. It just seems like it's designed to troll people at this specific. Because even if you get to, like, you could kill the first archer, and as soon as you kill the first archer, the second one might shoot you down. Those guys respawn.
Exactly.
So
Yep.
It's like, oh, well, I have to do this entire process again. So I ended up running past them overall.
Yeah, that's what I ended up doing too. I ended up like figuring out, oh, if you do your Ninpo, the fireball one, you can one-shot them. And I ended up like killing 2, getting knocked down by the third one, going back up, doing it all over again. You know, using my things to my elixirs to get back the Ninpo, and that happened 3 times where I would use 2 and get to the third one and get knocked down, and so I ended up like wall running past them eventually, and yeah, it's stupid. I actually even like one time I did kill all 3, and I missed the jump because of the camera, and that was also very frustrating. Go ahead.
Before we skip into the next chapter, there was a sub-boss that I had to fight. So in Hard, they introduced an evil Ryu, and you fight him when you're in the archive. And pretty much, as the name suggests, dude is just like an evil version of you who is... I almost want to call him Scrub Mode Ryu, because he's
You
just
mean
like
Ken?
Flying Swallow.
Is it Ken?
Kind of Ken, yeah. So he does a lot of Flying Swallows. He has a lot of really fast attacks. So it's just this really interesting thing where for the first time you're just fighting this dude with all of your arsenal, and you're like, I'm kind of like overpowered when I think about it in this sense. And it's just this really intense fight where both of you are just going all out, and like everything's going everywhere, and it's just hard to keep track of. So that was a really interesting thing.
Okay. What about... So, do we have to even talk about the... I guess we can talk about the boss real quick. We are running long, by the way. The Bone Dragon. Once you get to the middle, back up to back up the winding path, you awaken this Bone Dragon that's been, I guess, deactivated. I don't even know. And you end up fighting him, and I think he's a pretty simple boss. He lays down. He has the 4 limbs and a tail. He tries to swipe at you. He tries to bite you. He tries to hit you with his tail. And it's really just attacking him, dodging, and jumping. So there's not necessarily... I think he maybe even more so than the General Dynamo. I feel like his patterns were pretty simple to recognize and avoid as well. Did you guys, anybody... I mean, I did die. Don't get me wrong. I died a couple times, but did you guys have any issues with the Bone Dragon?
The only issue I had was dying after killing him.
Sounds like all you guys did.
Yeah.
Okay, well, going on to Chapter 7, you basically... You destroy the Bone Dragon, and he crashes to the bottom of the pit, and it basically cracks open some seal they have on it, so you're able to go further into the passage, and you go through. You fight some. I don't even think you fight any new enemies. You get some, I think, more platforming sequences, which I would not have. I don't think I would have passed it if it wasn't for Dante. Like this is the one of the very bow heavy sections of the game where you have to shoot like targets in order to, like, they have these 2 rooms and you can go into them in either order you want to, and you basically have to create a bridge or cross a bridge that has obstacles, in addition to having 3 of these, the bow and arrow zombie or ghouls shooting at you while you're trying to go across these bridges. And I just had the hardest time for some reason. Like, it wasn't even like the fact that those guys were there, because I was able to clear them out, but just going through the obstacle. They had like spikes on along the bridge and like the swinging axe blades. And if you get hit by the axe blades, you get knocked off and have to start over. And I think I died just 3 times just off the obstacles alone. And I didn't realize that there are those targets at the top of the ceiling that you could shoot at to slow down the obstacles. So it was literally, I feel like it's impossible if you don't shoot them. But I did.
Oh, I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, I didn't know about it until.
Oh my god! Like, yeah. I was so like, I was like, I'm done. I don't know how I'm gonna get past this part because I just could not do it. And once Dante told me, because you told me about the other room, I didn't know how to, the one where you have to shoot the target that creates the bridge. So you told me about it.
You're just like, what do I? Yeah.
Like I didn't see the target, so like I got in there and I killed everybody in here. How do I get across? And I just didn't look up high enough to see the target. And in that room, I saw the other target. So then when I went into the other room, I just randomly looked up and I saw targets in there. And I was like, oh, okay. And, yeah. How do you guys feel about this section? Because, I mean, it's not like, when I say the aiming / targeting with the bow, it's mostly just missing. Like, you shoot at the target and then I end up like, that first one is like, oh, I just missed it. I'm just getting my calibrations right. And that's when I first started realizing like, oh, this manual aim thing kind of sucks. And I know you had an issue, Trevor, like with the aiming, so.
Yeah, I went through this section extremely slow.
Like methodical?
Yeah, I know I didn't get any time bonuses for this level. That was the only way I knew I was going to get through it without making myself frustrated.
Okay. And I'm guessing that was just me and you. Like, these 2 guys, they just blazed through it.
I used to have a lot more problems with the bow, from what I remember. But this playthrough, it hasn't been bad for me. I don't know what's changed over the years.
Wow. How?
I feel like when you go into first person, if you just like draw a line from where the arrow's positioned to the center of your screen, you can find a kind of figure out its arc.
Mm-hmm.
So once I got that down, I really haven't been missing that much stuff.
Definitely,
but I could totally see how like
very frustrating. Excuse me. I think you end up like kind of retracking after that, and you end up making your way back to the monastery, and you end up going back, and you get to the main entryway, and you end up fighting this floating boss character named Alma, and 2 things. One, I had no idea who this character was. She looked kind of like Rachel, but I was like, I just basically just because these 2 girls were like these 2 really busty girls. That was really it. So I was like, oh, okay. I'm not really tracking the story that well, so I didn't realize that this is actually her sister. And then the other thing was, isn't this the character or the like everybody was telling me like, wait till you get to Alma, and I was like, oh, this is that fight. So can you give a little backstory about this fight, Dante? Yeah.
So, you know how Greg said people quit the game on Chapter 1 because of Mirai?
She's like notoriously known as like the stopping point for people, right? The what?
Yeah, she is the Ornstein and Smoo of Ninja Gaiden. That's a Dark Souls reference, but essentially that's like this giant bridge you're expected to get over about halfway through the game. And you either get over the bridge or you don't. Because, like, when I played it the first time, I remember being stuck on her forever, pretty much. It was at least a
Did you have any issues, Greg? Or, like, what is your history with this character? Yeah.
Oh, against Alma? So I definitely died a couple times when playing it this time. I do remember having a lot of problems originally. I mean, eventually I think I just kind of brute forced it. But this time, like, so I don't know how you guys were getting through it this time, but you know, it seems like you just kind of wait her out until she kind of gets grounded, then you use Fly and Swallow, and eventually that stops working. And then the next thing was you just kind of had to like keep waiting her out again, and then instead of using Flying Swallow, you would do the run dash attack with X, and then that worked. But I think before what I ended up doing was just using the Nimpo when she did like kind of finally become a little stationary, and that worked pretty well because that would knock her down, and then you could get some more damage that way.
I just don't understand. Like I think I got lucky or something because it only took me like 5 or 6 tries to beat her. And it was mostly like, once I figured out the Flying Swallow, I was like, I'm just doing this move. That's it. So, like, I didn't even wait to see what she did. I just immediately Flying Swallowed and just got in her ass. And, yeah, definitely. Like, so, like, at the certain point,
the only thing about that is eventually she just starts dodging.
At that point, it was just kind of like, oh, well, I just got to hit you like 1 or 2 more times, and then it's a wrap. I was getting bodied at first by her little laser command grab thing. Like I was like, how do I avoid this thing? But once I just started moving and like not being underneath her, like I realized, oh, if you're in this specific section, it will trigger her to do that. So I just stayed in the range where I could trigger the things that I could more easily avoid. You know? No.
You still weren't using roll jump at this point?
God. I just ran.
What do you even do against those pillars? Because even with
I just ran.
I don't feel confident against those pillars she throws.
What? The one time I rolled and didn't jump, I got hit by the second pillar.
So then, like, I found out, like, oh, if I stay underneath her, she will do it. So, there was, like, a specific range or, like, radius around her where I figured out, like, oh, she will do this move if I'm in this area. So I make sure that I'm not in that area. And like the few times that she did do it, I was on the edge of that. So the laser started before it expanded, and I was able to run out before it expanded to where it would have hit me. Basically, it's tight.
Nimpo against her is also a really good way of dodging a lot of her command grabs. Speaking of which, I do want to get your take.
The one where she wraps her legs around her neck, it's pretty, or at least her necks or her legs or her tail is pretty beastly. Obviously, the one too where the laser one is pretty cool. But they did so much damage, like 80% of your life. And then the dive kick one too, right? Yeah, she got some pretty good command grabs. I'm not gonna lie. Trevor, what about you? How did you feel about this character?
So Dante warned me that Flying Swallow was going to be my friend on this boss fight. Well, he gave me a hint, but it didn't work at all. Like, I could not land a single Flying Swallow. The only way I was able to beat this boss was by using Nimpo, and then basically, you know, after she falls, getting my hits in. But this is where I actually mastered roll jumps and dodging.
So basically, this is where you learn how to play the game.
and that was, that was my saving grace for this boss battle, was just figuring out the timing and roll jumping. And then I think after I ran out of like the double elixir and my Nimpo, I ended up just using like the uppercut strike with the dragon sword, and that was just how I had to beat her. There was just no other way around it, because she wasn't having any flying swallows.
Oh, gotcha.
When he says uppercut, I think he means XY.
Gotcha.
Like to knock off there.
So yeah, I'm glad that. How many times did you say it took you, Trevor? Or did you say? Okay, then I'm glad we were able to
maybe about 4.
Not be statistics. No podcasters left behind. Yeah. So well, I guess we'll and then the most messed up part is the cutscene afterwards. Rachel has the ability, she's tasked with, I don't know why, but she's tasked with chopping her sister's head off, and she doesn't do it. Her sister just like looks her in the eye, and then I guess at that moment she feels sorry for her, and so she just lets her live. And I already know it's just going to come back to bite you. I already know. So we will be fighting this character again at some point, you know. So yeah, chapter 8, you're back in Tyron, the city, and this time there's a heavy military presence. So instead of fighting ninjas and everything, you're fighting the Vigorian infantry, and there's APC, or APCs with turrets on them, and the dudes with RPGs, and you're just fighting a lot of soldiers at this point. And I think this is a short level, right? I think it's pretty short. And this one,
very short.
I think you get like an upgraded bow or something on this level, but there's really not much. There's not much new here, because like you're in the old open world area that you're familiar with. It's just different enemies you fight. And then that leads us to the final chapter we played, chapter 9, the military supply base. And this is where Ryu decides to take the fight to the military. And so you fight some funky, like you're fighting a lot of the infantry and, turrets and all that. You fight some freaking drones, and that drone part was so frustrating. That's where I learned, you need to roll jump. That's what I learned. Like, this is important. But yeah, those drones, they shoot these blue lasers, and you're basically in this big warehouse that they keep respawning. And there's like 5 that you have to fight at a time. And they're...
The unfortunate part
I ended up picking it up on my way back to Tehran, but I didn't use it against them because I didn't know. So this is where I found out that bows are trash, really, because I got the piercing arrows. I forgot with the ASOC or whatever arrows, and I would try to quick fire them at the drones, and every third one would hit. So it was very frustrating, because it was like there's 5 of these dudes, they're flying and moving. I'm not going to have enough time to be able to shoot one of them before taking damage with the manual. So let me just quick fire. And I was using so many arrows and not hitting them, and it was very frustrating. And but basically you have to like deal with these drones in this empty warehouse while you're trying to turn on the power and like kind of traversing this warehouse. Did you have any issues with this, Trevor? I'm assuming Greg and Dante didn't. Yeah, just dealing with them.
As far as the drones, not necessarily. I did have a problem with the like the quick fire. That wasn't working at all. But what I did was, I like got into a corner where the drones like had very limited view, and I waited till they got in range for me to shoot them down.
So it was nothing?
So I kind of just exploited it. Like I said, quick fire wasn't working, because I did try that. I went through a whole round of arrows trying to quick fire, but that just wasn't working. So I ran around the map till I could find a spot where they weren't terrorizing me.
After this, you fight the boss or a series of bosses and the military, and it's
military.
so you fight a tank
Literally, you're a ninja
with a turret in it, and like a person, like I think there's like a man turret, and the way the cutscene goes is you start
a man turret,
and like 5 dudes run to this prone or this tank that's not functioning. They hop in it, then it starts moving around, and one of the guys comes out to man the turret, and then the fight is on. And the tank does so much damage. The tank, like Trevor said earlier, the tank tracks you just like those arrows did, the archers did. Where if I jumped, I got hit. It was like almost guaranteed I was going to get hit. Say that again?
You got to roll jump.
Yeah, well, I was still new. I was still new to it.
Because so at least the strategy that
turret
I found,
gun or
no matter
cannon.
what, it still has to turn its little like primary gun or whatever before it shoots.
It's still pegging you for damage. It's little, but it adds up so
quickly.
quickly.
The man turret is still chipping away.
Yep. So what I ended up doing was like, I think this is how you have to do it, but you have to manual aim. And so like I found out, I should manual aim, take out the gunner guy so I'm not taking any more damage, try to shoot 1 or 2 quick fire shots into the tank, and then move. But it ends up like, in theory, that's how it should have been, but it was way less graceful when I was doing it because, like, obviously, like, my first shot, I would miss when I'm manual aiming on the guy, so then I would try to correct, and half the time I would overcorrect, and I'd shoot a second arrow that I would miss. Then at that point, then the tank is looking at me, so I have to rinse, repeat, like, reposition myself, rinse, repeat. And then the other times, like, sometimes I would shoot, like... And this is when, this chapter in particular, is when I found out that quickfire is trash. Like, I felt it before, but it wasn't until this chapter that I realized it. Because there would be so many times where I would try to quickfire, like, 2 arrows just to get some quick damage on the tank, and they would completely miss. And then I would die, and then start over, same exact situation, same exact position, quick fire 2, and they'd both hit. And, like, I couldn't consistently figure out, like, why does it hit sometimes and sometimes it doesn't? And it's, like, even worse on the next boss, but the tanks were very frustrating and started making me, like, I hated having to manual aim, and these bosses, that was, like, it seemed like the only way you could reliably hit them. Did you have that? Did any of you guys have that issue, or it's just me?
It might just be you. I know, like, so my strategy with the tanks was just, I was only worried about the cannon fire because the gunshots, like, you know, the turret wasn't doing enough damage to even really, you know, be a big issue. So I would just dodge the cannon and then just do the quick fire and then do as much damage as I could before the next cannon shot would come, and then dodge that and just keep doing that. What about you,
Trevor? Did you have any issues?
I'm actually still stuck on this level right now.
Oh man.
Yeah, the last attempt I had, I used every elixir I had in my inventory.
How defeated were you?
And then the second tank came out.
How, like, heartbroken were you?
Man.
I was so mad.
Like,
I did too.
Like, I honestly thought that was going to be the final boss.
Drop another one. Another one.
Just, like Dante was saying with the those skeleton archers, like being a middle finger from the developer. That was another middle finger right there, throwing in that second tank. But yeah, I still can't get the hang of quickfire. Like, even on this level, it's just not even working. And something either Dante or Greg said earlier about using quickfire is you hit B while you're standing. Maybe I'm moving and trying to quickfire.
Don't excuse
and not standing still.
It's not your
Maybe
fault.
that's why it's not working. So maybe I need to pay more attention to make sure I'm not holding down the left stick, and I don't know, give quickfire another try, because having to aim is definitely not working on here, because like y'all said, they have that man turret at the top of the tank.
Yep.
And he's just gonna take you out of first person view every time.
Yeah, so what I did against the two tanks was pretty much like, if there was a guy on top of the tank, I'd take him out first, and then I'd go for the body. And it still took me a couple more tries than I'd like to admit.
So you didn't get past the tank, Trevor? Okay. Well, boy, do I have something to tell you.
No, that's where I stopped.
There's more. But wait, there's more. So after you fight the two tanks, you go up an elevator, and then you get to fight a helicopter. But even before then, there's like, you're on like this long landing, or walkway, and there's two dudes with RPGs, and they're like fodder enemies. I literally I literally stood on the opposite side of the landing, and those dudes would like they would shift or strafe, I guess you could say, back and forth, and then when they would ready their fire, they would stop and shoot their RPG. And I quick fired 10 arrows, and I didn't hit a single one. I didn't hit them at all. And that's when I realized, like, oh, quick fire is trash. And then, of course, I fought the plane, or the helicopter. The helicopter starts on one side of the walkway and kind of flies over you, shooting at you and stuff. And you can shoot like 3 or 4 quickfire arrows, and like I couldn't consistently hit them. Like sometimes it would hit them 4 times, sometimes it wouldn't hit them at all. Like I couldn't figure out why. So then Dante, he very strongly urged that I just manual aim, and I started manual aiming, and I still had the issue where I would miss like my first 1 or 2 shots before I put some damage on them. But thankfully they had like ammo crates, I guess you could say, on either side of the walkway. You just had to run to it. But then I ran into the issue where his attack pattern was to like swoop at you and shoot like 4 missiles that you had to dodge. And when he was flying like horizontal to you, I guess, or not horizontal, perpendicular to you, it was easier to dodge. But when he was flying directly at you, like parallel to you, like those were when I was like, the camera really, really frustrated me, because the camera prioritized the movement of the helicopter because it was in the air. So sometimes I would misgauge the perspective, and I would jump too soon or too late into a missile. You had the same issue where the missiles were way more godlike at tracking you when you're in the air than when you're on the ground. And then there's also the enemy would swoop at you, again parallel, like basically right over the walkway, and drop bombs on the walkway you're on. And so the camera would prioritize the helicopter, so when it swoops over you and past you, it flips the camera angle, so it's almost back to like you running at the camera again. And at the last minute, and a couple times I jumped directly into the bombs it was dropping because the camera switched so quickly, and you pretty much, I think I lost like 80% of my life, and or died. And that was very, very frustrating. And so like that fight in particular, I had a time with the camera, because that fight prioritizes the movement of the helicopter, which it probably should, over your movement. So it was like the two things I was fighting against, the two things that I liked the least in this game: the camera, and then the shooting, the manual shooting of the bow and arrow. So you have that to look forward to. And I'm guessing you two don't have issues with that boss, like the same issues I had, Trevor, or Dante and Greg.
No, I didn't really have any big issues.
Trash. We knew that though. And then no, I didn't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Did you hear me?
Wow.
It was like a minute and a half.
That's
late.
almost as disrespectful as what this happened in this game. Um, yeah, and after that fight though, like it's there's another section where you have to use your manual aim to aim at a couple of specific targets while getting shot at by RPG guys and some more drones, and it's not after those the boss fight, like those are the highlights, the two tanks and the helicopter, those are the highlights of the level, and everything else is pretty straightforward. But yeah, the helicopter and tanks were pretty frustrating. I died one time because I didn't know you were supposed to. I didn't know what you're supposed to do, so I didn't know you were supposed to shoot at what you were supposed to shoot at. And then I ended up dying. And then when I was like, I shot all the enemies. I'm like,
Gotcha.
oh, they're like slowly coming back, and not like a whole bunch of them. I kind of was like, maybe I should shoot these things in the meantime, just like practice aiming or whatever. And then I beat it. So I was like, okay, cool.
So I did figure out a small strategy with the bow. If you roll and then go into
What did that mean? Work? Oh,
first
getting
aim or
into
whatever,
it.
It seems to work a lot.
My
better.
issue is not getting into it.
least
It's
a lot
the
faster.
actual aiming. Like, there's not a reticle
Yeah.
or anything to let me know where I'm shooting. And even when you go into first person mode or zoom in, like you said, that's like, to me that's worse. It just like magnifies what you're already looking at, which is like, I guess, cool, but it doesn't help me any to know where my shot's going to go.
I think once you get the strong bow, it's a little bit easier in that I don't think the shots drop off as far. Because one of the things with the bow is like there's a little bit of drop off from where you aim.
Not hitting my target is what I'm having issue with. It's just the accuracy of the bow. Like, I don't know where my shot is going, if that makes any sense. Something to let me know to where it's.
Oh, so
where
you
I'm
just kind of would rather have like a
'cause,
reticle somewhere
I
that would
literally
be like,
every time I shoot my bow, I'm having to shoot two shots because the first shot is not going to hit my intended target, and I have to like recalibrate based off where I see the first shot goes. And I don't know if you knew you could zoom in, because Dante told me that last night or 2 nights ago or whatever, and like it like just magnifies what the issue is. So it's like you're looking at the same exact view, it's just closer up. And it's like, cool, but where am I shooting though? You know? And maybe if I used it more, then I could like mentally like gauge like, okay, this is around where it should be, and this is, but like a lot of times when I'm needing to use the bow, it's not necessarily about precision, it's about hitting a target, you know? So it's not like I'm aiming at a tank, I'm aiming at a helicopter. It doesn't matter where I hit it, I just need to hit it.
Yeah, when I told you that, I don't think I realized that I never used that myself.
You could do this, but I don't. I mean, I get it. Yeah,
I was like, maybe
it was. It's beneficial, but the issue I'm having is like not that I can't see what I'm shooting. It's like I don't know where I'm shooting.
Yeah.
And if you guys got anything you need to add for chapter 9? God, to it. Oh, go ahead, man. You got the story beats, because I have no idea.
I guess we should add how it ends up or whatever. So, pretty much Ryu takes down the whole military's like communication system, so they're in shambles. And at some point, he hops on a train and rides it into another train, and then there's a really cool explosion that happens. And the point where we leave off, I guess, is he's going into the sewers to find another secret entrance into the Vigorian Empire.
Okay. I forgot one other thing. Like, so in between chapters 8 and 9, like you end the chapter of 8, and then you go down a manhole and to begin chapter 9, and I realized I missed something at the top of the street. So I went back, immediately climbed back up out of the manhole. So I hit X to prompt the animation, and you can't cancel the animation. But once you get into the sewer, there's like a gang of bats that start attacking you. And so I literally was climbing up, stuck in an animation, climbing up this ladder, and the bats just swarmed me and took off 75% of my life. So, like, I went from being 100% life at the beginning of Chapter 9 to 25 in, like, 3 seconds. And it was so annoying. And I was like, this game right here, only this game could do this. Like, I wouldn't have been mad. I actually probably would have been mad if I died. But at the very least, it wasn't like I was going back and having to fight a boss. But I probably would have rather died at the end, or died and had to play the end of Chapter 8 than to have lost 75% of my life that way. Annoying. Yeah, there was a save right before, but it was just very annoying.
You did hit a save right before then, right? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, well...
Yeah, wait until you reach the fish.
Yippee! I can't wait. Do we have anything else that we need to talk about? I think you guys had one thing you wanted to discuss. One more thing. Yeah.
Were you talking about the kind of likes and dislikes up to this point? Yeah. I did kind of want to just
get a feel
for what everybody
enjoyed
and really didn't like about
it.
Or
do you want it for me and Trevor? Because we're, I don't know, like... Okay.
No, I can start. That's fine. I mean, this is probably like my favorite action game, I think.
Preach.
You know, like the big thing that I like about it so much compared to like some of the other games, it's not necessarily about like stringing together long combos. It's kind of like basically moving around a lot, trying to like recognize patterns, thinking on your feet. So it's not a lot of repetition to it, I guess, right? So that's kind of like one of my favorite things, and I feel like all the weapons generally feel different, and they kind of can accomplish different things. But that's probably the thing I like the most about the game. I feel like the movement and the combat kind of accentuate each other, and one doesn't like overpower the other. And I guess the only big gripes that I have about the game, and it's just probably because it's just a product of its time, it's just kind of like the camera's not super great. The platforming isn't great. There's a few scenarios where you end up with cheap deaths or like kind of hard to avoid deaths. But for sure, it's probably like, like easily one of the best action games.
Trevor, what you got?
Okay, so y'all heard most of my dislikes already. It's mostly the camera angle, the bow, spider ninjas. But my likes, I do like that this game has a lot of enemy variety, because we're only halfway through the game, and I feel like, we're just going to get more and more enemies throughout the next chapters. And along with that, like, this game seems like it's gone through phases now. Like, you start in like a really feudal Japan type theme, and then it goes into a very fantasy style theme. Like, I was telling Dante, like, I thought we were playing Final Fantasy once we got to the monastery and all that. And now you're in like a very like military type with tanks and soldiers and whatnot. And so it just has a lot going for it thematically, and the animation's pretty cool too.
Has a cool animation, but not the cool platforming, right?
Well, animation as far as attacks, like your
I just
attacks,
remember
and
you
also
said
the
like
enemies,
this is the topic when we were talking about Enslaved. You said, "Oh, I just really like good animation and platforming." It already checks all your boxes. That's what it was.
Yeah. Well, this game has all the things I like in it. It just does some of them
What about you, Dante?
So, I'm kind of in the same boat as Greg, where I always go back and forth on this, whether it's my absolute favorite of all time, but this and Devil May Cry 3 constantly just teeter.
Can I ask you guys something? I don't mean to cut you off, but I have a burning question
of the day.
So, like, the only one that I would throw up there that I've played is Bayonetta. And from my understanding, Bayonetta was, like, considered, like, this is how you make this game. This is how you do it. Is it, like, too basic? Do you not have, like, the same, nostalgia for it, or like why do you put these two games above Bayonetta? Or like I don't know how you feel about Bayonetta in comparison.
So Bayonetta, I'm a pretty big fan of Bayonetta. I guess as far as why I like these games more, Bayonetta is a lot closer to Devil May Cry 3. I think it's Mikami that does these games, right, Greg?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's probably
Focus
the
more on style than
spiritual
difficulty,
successor to
right?
Devil May Cry 3. But I just
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like I like the aesthetics of Devil May Cry a little bit more than Bayonetta, and also Bayonetta has a ton of QTEs, which I think is the bane of gaming in a lot of regards. So
Gotcha.
I'm kind of disappointed every time I end up with a QTE in my game. I give that like Bayonetta a slight knock for that. Ninja Gaiden is this perfect balance between Dark Souls and Devil May Cry. So you have the moveset of a Devil May Cry game, but you also have the defensive aspect in like the learning of a Dark Souls game. So every time I go into this game, I feel like I'm learning something new. And I think that's just a really cool thing. The movement is very fluid. And I know this is one of the things, like I saw it in a post on your wall, and I think Trevor said at one point that they found it a little stiff. I think once you get a hold of your entire moveset and also what kind of change into something else, a lot of that stiffness is gone. So, I don't know, like, every time I think about this game in my mind, it's just this giant epic battle, and I wish there was a photo mode like you alluded to earlier, or some way to, like, record without having any of, like, the UI elements on screen, because I think that this game would look insane as far as, like, what's actually going on during a fight. Yeah, I absolutely love this game. I think some of the platforming's a little wonky. The camera isn't always the best.
Yeah, and since I'm last,
but overall I am very high on this game.
I mean, I will probably echo a lot of what has already been said, and it's funny because I actually had a list written down, and I kind of touched on, I think, everything at this point, but basically my pros are the variety of enemies and the combat and the environments. Like, I really enjoy that aspect of this game. I think the cutscenes and just like Trevor said, the animations, I think a lot of that stuff has aged really, really well. So it's a very striking game even now. And I do think the enemy encounters, like I like in general, like the idea that like the way combat is, you're learning as you go. And so every enemy encounter could be your last. I do like that aspect of the game. It's a little frustrating at times, but I do think that that is a cool aspect, and that's something that I personally don't feel like I've ever experienced in a game before. And then like my cons, I guess you could say, like off the jump, like the big ones are like the camera, which we've talked about a bunch, and just how I wish it could be tweaked a little bit, and in regards to the tracking and just like some of the perspective stuff when platforming. Another big one I said was just the shooting, the quick fire, specifically with the bow and arrow, and just like maybe making it a little bit more like a reticle or something to let me know where I'm going to hit when I shoot if I'm manually aiming. That would make it easier for me. It's fine, I guess, right now. I'm just thankful that you don't have to upgrade your ranged weapons like you do your main weapons. So like if I had to start off with 5 bows, like 5 arrows, and then had to level up, that would be a lot more frustrating. But since you start off with 15 from the jump, then it's a little bit more bearable when you do miss 1 or 2 shots. You still have a decent amount of ammo left. Another thing I kind of said earlier is I kind of wish that you could quickly go between weapons and not having to go through the pause menu all the time, or just the menus all the time in order to heal up or to switch weapons or anything like that. And then 2 other ones, I think I touched on one of the 2 of these. The save system, I think for the most part, is pretty fine. I like there are two standout chapters for me where if I hadn't, and this is kind of on me, but it's kind of also just speaks to the difficulty of the game. Chapter 5, like having to fight 5 batches of enemies before after the save point in order to get to the boss, and having to consistently do that in order to get there was very frustrating. And like I could have skipped through them, but I needed to fight them in order to get my life back. So it was kind of like a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. And then another chapter that I had an issue with was I think it was chapter 8. Yeah, so it was like you get to this big room, big circular area with a train in the middle, and you have to fight a whole bunch of infantrymen. And I fought them all. You unlock the door, and I was like about to go through the door. Then I was like, let me check real quick. And there was a save spot, and it reminded me of a time when I was playing over Discord with Dante. And there's a spot where you trigger a flood, and you're at the bottom of the tunnels, and there's water. And if you swim underwater and go to this hole in this area, there's a save point there. And it's something that is completely skippable. Like, you can completely miss that not on purpose. And it, like, if you were to die, you would lose a decent amount of, 5-10 minutes or whatever. That's including combat, or 20 minutes including combat. That's not that big of a deal. But I don't like the concept of save points that you can miss. Like, if you're going to make your game as hard as it is, you should make them in my opinion, they should be a little bit more like on the beaten path. Personally, it shouldn't be like a reward, like, oh, you explored, here's a save point. It should be like, I that was one thing I didn't really care for, and it's only happened a couple times, but it's not that big of a deal. But it kind of irked me when it did happen. And then just like my last thing, which is kind of like a weird complaint, but how the enemies spawn. Sometimes I'll like get into an encounter, and like I think at most they have you fight 3 enemies. There's a select few types of enemies in this game where you fight more than 3, but I kind of wish they just spawned all the enemies. It's a weird kind of gripe I have. Do you know what I'm saying, Dante? Where like you'll kill somebody and then another enemy spawns, so like you never know how many enemies you have to fight. I kind of wish that like maybe you would go into a room, 9 enemies are there, only 3 are attacking you, and the other 6 are kind of on the outer edges of the fight, and you can attack them to keep your combo going or whatever. But like I kind of wish that's how the game was a little bit. You just knew how many enemies you had to fight when you walked into an area versus them constantly spawning. It's a weird complaint.
Yeah, I can definitely see like at least what you're saying. I don't know. No, it's an understandable thing because they do spawn enemies throughout the fights. And Greg, do you remember any like the fiend challenges?
There's one that I actually ran into in the monastery where if you go, yeah, when you go back into the archive, you end up fighting like I'm throwing out a number, but it seemed like 30 enemies, like the 60. Yeah, and I got into there, and I was just like, 60. Jesus, when will this end?
Yep.
Because like I was like, I thought I was backtracking like where I was supposed to go, but I was wrong, and I ended up getting stuck in this room and having to fight 60 enemies. And it just seemed like they kept spawning, or at the very least, give me a counter in the top right hand corner that says like X9, X8, X7, as I'm killing people, something to know like. So I know how long this encounter will be. I think that would like, because then I know how frugal to be with my.
Well,
it tells you.
That goes back to the left bumper thing that Greg was talking about.
Oh, I don't want to know what my combo is. Like, I want to know how many enemies are left.
You've got, your current combo.
So like if I walk. Okay, because
At least for the fiend
I
challenges,
didn't know it was a fiend challenge. So like I walked in there and I was just like, oh, 60. I have to refight these enemies that I already fought. So then I killed like 8 of them, and I was like, okay, the thing should be done. That's how many there were the first time. And then I killed like 16 of them. I'm like, yo, I killed twice as many as my game glitched. And I killed like 30. And I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna ride this thing out and see how many But I didn't know how many I was fighting, and I didn't know the concept of a fiend challenge. So it was weird.
That's fair. One other thing that I wanted to say about the game, I really appreciate the changes between difficulty modes. So the entire layout of every fight is different between normal and hard, hard and very hard and Master Ninja, and also item placement and stuff like that. So it's almost like you're playing a new game, or at least
I also have
a
one more
very
thing
good
to add
new game
too.
plus every time you.
Like ultimately, I think this game is a perfect balance of Dark Souls and Devil May Cry, and I don't want anything to do with either of them.
Oh man, if you even knew how bad, like, I don't want to say but how much stricter.
I told you before we started recording today. I was like, I had a passing interest in Dark Souls, and after playing this game, that desire has been extinguished. I never want to play a Dark Souls game, any of them. I don't care, like Bloodborne, slightly easier, or any game that's Dark Souls like. I don't want to play it because this game.
Fans, you've heard us talk, and if you want to submit games for us to play,
yeah, man,
say in probably like 3 or 4 months,
I have no desire. I mean, I will if we have to play it for the podcast, but I am not on my like I said. I downloaded Dark Souls 2 with the Xbox 360 games with gold, and I think it might even be downloaded to my hard drive. I think the next time I turn on my 360, I'm gonna delete it because I just don't need that space wasted. I don't need that space wasted. I don't need that negativity in my life.
And then throw the 360 out the window.
Do we have anything else? We've run. I think this is going to be like up there as one of our longest, maybe second longest episode. So let's cut it before we break it. We break the record. Do you guys got anything else? Any final closing thoughts? That's a word for it. Yeah.
Testament to the quality of the game.
It did. I actually enjoyed posting my frustrations about the game and having people, whether it be them laughing at me or them giving me advice or them like relating to what I'm going through. I did like the conversations that the game sparked. And even when people were attacking you when you said the game is not that hard, I thought that was funny too. Well, in comparison to like other like games of the series,
I said it was
that's what I meant, I guess. But I guess yeah. We'll wrap this up. Greg, we got any questions?
No questions, but you guys know where to hit us up if you want to get involved with the show. You can hit us up at misscheckpoints@gmail.com.
Or if you want to share any of your own
and I think Dante will still be streaming, so you can definitely check him out at. Yes. Awesome.
Twitch.tv.
Yeah, Trevor, you're streaming as well, aren't you?
As well as Trevor.
Catch him outside.
Yeah, you can catch me on. I'll either be on Mixer or Twitch. I might go back to Twitch, but either one, I'm Lyric Unsung.
Okay. What about you, Greg? Where can people reach you at?
You can find me on Twitter at BoomboxHero, on Facebook at facebook.com/BoomboxHero, and on Twitch at twitch.tv/XDRDMagnegroX.
On Facebook, posting about this game. I've been trying to make sure that, I do a update or like I post something, I guess you could say, mysterious or whatever, about whatever chapter I'm on, or complaining about whatever chapter, or just generally talking about my disposition with this game or with the types of players that enjoy this game.
It's pretty much if Donald Trump
this game
had
is for
access
stupid kids.
to Ninja Gaiden.
This game is for people that only got one game for Christmas and one game for their birthday, and those are the only 2 games they got all year. I don't have time. I had options. I didn't have time to master this ninja game. Ugh. No, thank you.
Once you
thank
tackle
you.
this, you'll be able to play Devil May Cry 3.
Is he basically just like a Ninja Turtle,
what
right?
Dante's about.
He just like sees the pizza loving, wisecracking guy. I'm good. Okay, yeah, I'm good. I would just watch Ninja Turtles. They're cooler.
Yeah.
Yeah, so check me out, facebook.com /potato salad, P0TAT05ALAD. Or just search me, Marqus Dawson. Yeah. Nothing else, right? We don't have anything else to talk about for this game for now. Going once. Yeah, we're going to finish the rest of the game. Dante's going to finish it a second time.
I guess we're playing through the rest of the game. That's something we're doing.
All right, well, with that, we are Miss Checkpoints, and we're out. Peace.